Welcome to Lena Romantasy Collection. You are about to dive into a story full of chaos, chemistry, and one very angry cat. Before we start, I slapped the Alpha King. Please hit that like button, share this video with a friend who needs a laugh, and subscribe so you never miss a romance. Also, I love meeting our community. Drop a comment below and tell me where you are listening from today. Now, get comfortable and let's see what happens when a parching dispute turns into a fated mate bond. Let's begin. Chapter 1: The Christmas Eve Meltdown. If stress had a scent, Brenda imagined it would smell like stale gingerbread lattes and diesel fumes. It was 4:45 p.m. on Christmas Eve, and Brenda, a 28-year-old crisis management consultant who was currently failing to manage her own crisis, was trapped in the seventh circle of hell, otherwise known as the downtown traffic gridlock surrounding the Platinum Plaza. "I'm going to die here, Jane," Brenda said, her voice tight as she gripped the steering wheel of her beat-up Honda Civic. "They're going to find my frozen body in January, clutching a lukewarm coffee and a list of regrets." "You are being dramatic," Jane's voice crackled through the car's Bluetooth speakers. Jane was Brenda's assistant, best friend, and the only person who knew exactly how unhinged Brenda actually was beneath her professional blazer. "You are 3 blocks away. Just breathe." "I can't breathe, Jane. I have 15 minutes until the jeweler closes. 15. If I don't pick up that vintage watch, I show up to my father's house tomorrow empty-handed. Again. And then it's another year of him looking at me with those sad, disappointment-filled eyes while he mutters about how I work too hard to care about family." Brenda aggressively honked at a Santa Claus who was jaywalking too slowly. "Move it, Saint Nick. Some of us have daddy issues to resolve." Inside the car, the heater was rattling, emitting a noise that sounded suspiciously like a dying animal. In the passenger seat sat a travel carrier containing Fluffy, her overweight orange Persian cat. Brenda had been forced to bring him along because her apartment building was being fumigated for unexpected pests over the holiday. Fluffy let out a low, demonic yowl. "Shut up, Fluffy," Brenda snapped, checking her mirrors. "I know you hate the car. I hate the car. We are bonded in hatred." Fluffy hissed and turned his fluffy rear end toward her, pressing his face against the mesh of the carrier. He was a spiteful creature who only tolerated Brenda because she provided the premium salmon pâté. Brenda merged lanes, cutting off a minivan with a precision born of pure desperation. She was a woman on the edge. Her job usually involved cleaning up PR disasters for tech CEOs who tweeted offensive things at 3 a.m., or helping politicians spin scandals into learning opportunities. She was used to high pressure. She thrived on adrenaline. But this was different. This was personal. The vintage Omega watch she had spent 6 months tracking down and another 3 months paying to have restored was the olive branch she desperately needed. Her father, a retired military man who valued punctuality and tradition above all else, had been drifting away from her ever since she moved to the city. This gift was supposed to say, "I see you, I respect you, and I'm sorry I missed Thanksgiving." "Okay, I see the entrance," Brenda said, her heart hammering against her ribs. "I'm going in. If I don't make it, tell Gerald I quit and that his toupee looks like a dead squirrel." "Noted. Good luck, boss. Don't get arrested." Brenda swung the Honda into the underground parking garage of the Platinum Plaza. It was a chaotic war zone of luxury SUVs and panicked shoppers. The air was thick with exhaust and the aggressive jingling of Christmas bells. She circled level 1, full. She circled level 2, full. "Come on," she whispered, her knuckles turning white. She glanced at the dashboard clock. 4:52 p.m. She had 8 minutes. She descended to level 3, the VIP level. Usually she wouldn't dare park here. The fees were extortionate, but she was desperate. She drove slowly, her eyes scanning the rows of gleaming Mercedes and BMWs like a predator hunting prey. Nothing. 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 And then, like a miracle from the heavens, she saw it, right near the elevator bank, a single empty space. It was glorious. It was wide. It was perfect. A beam of fluorescent light seemed to shine down upon the concrete. Yes, Brenda shrieked. Fluffy, look, it's a Christmas miracle. She hit her blinker, shifted into reverse, and prepared to back into the spot with the efficiency of a professional. She was going to make it. She was going to get the watch. She was going to save Christmas. She took her foot off the brake, ready to glide backward. Then she heard the roar of an engine. Not a normal engine, a deep, guttural growl that vibrated the floorboards of her Honda. Before she could react, a shadow blurred across her rearview mirror. Chapter 2: The Aston Martin Incident. It happened in slow motion. 1 second, the parking spot was empty, a sanctuary of asphalt waiting to embrace her tires. The next second, a matte black Aston Martin Vanquish swerved around the corner, ignoring the one-way arrows painted on the floor. With a sleek, arrogant slide, the massive luxury vehicle nosed directly into the spot Brenda had been reversing into. The driver didn't even hesitate. He pulled in, straightened out, and killed the engine. Brenda slammed on her brakes, her Honda jerking to a halt in the middle of the driving lane. She stared. She blinked. She stared again. He stole it, she whispered, her brain struggling to process the sheer audacity. He stole my spot. Fluffy meowed, a sound that sounded distinctly mocking. The red haze of rage that descended over Brenda's vision was unlike anything she had ever experienced in her professional life. She had been yelled at by senators. She had been insulted by billionaires. She had handled crisis situations involving embezzling CFOs and exploding batteries. She had always kept her cool. But this was a violation of the sacred laws of the parking lot. This was a declaration of war. She checked the clock. 4:55 p.m. Oh, hell no, she hissed. She didn't find another spot. She didn't drive away. She threw her Honda into park right there in the middle of the lane, effectively blocking traffic from both directions. Alexis behind her honked immediately. Honk all you want, she screamed at the rearview mirror, unbuckling her seatbelt. Justice is being served. She grabbed her purse, shoved her hair out of her face, and marched out of her car. Her boots slammed against the concrete, echoing with the fury of a woman scorned. The driver of the Aston Martin was just opening his door. Brenda didn't wait for him to get out. She marched right up to the driver's side window and slammed her hand against the glass. Bang, bang, bang. "Excuse me," she yelled, her voice echoing through the garage. "Excuse me, your Royal Highness of douchebaggery." The door opened. Brenda took a step back, prepared to launch into her tirade, but she had to tilt her head back, and then back some more, and then a little more. The man who stepped out of the car was massive. That was the only word for it. He wasn't just tall, he was constructed like a skyscraper. He had to be at least 6'4", with shoulders that strained the fabric of a charcoal gray suit that probably cost more than Brenda's entire college education. His hair was dark, trimmed short, and he had a jawline sharp enough to cut glass. He turned to look at her, and the air around them seemed to drop 10 degrees. His eyes were a startling, icy blue, and they held an intensity that would have made a lesser woman wither. He didn't speak. He just looked down at her, his expression one of mild, bored annoyance, like she was a gnat buzzing around his head. That look was the gasoline on Brenda's fire. "Oh, don't you look at me like that," Brenda snapped a manicured finger at his chest. "I know you saw me. My reverse lights were on. I had the angle. That was a Class A jerk move." The man blinked slowly. He glanced at her car, blocking the lane, and then back at her. "You are blocking traffic," he said. His voice was deep, baritone deep. It was the kind of voice that usually made people shut up and listen. Brenda was immune. I don't care about traffic, she shouted, waving her arms. I care about common decency. I care about the unwritten social contract of the parking garage. You can't just swoop in like some entitled Batman and steal the only spot on the level because your car costs more than my kidney. She was on a roll now. The stress of the watch, the disappointment of her father, the traffic, the cat, it all came pouring out in a verbal avalanche. Do you think the lines on the road are just suggestions for people in tax brackets above a certain limit? Do you think yield applies to everyone except men with jawlines and expensive watches? The man tilted his head slightly, a faint, arrogant smirk playing on his lips. He looked amused. He was laughing at her. Are you finished? He asked, his tone dripping with condescension. Because I have a gala to attend, and you are vibrating. He turned to walk away, dismissing her completely. He turned his back on her. Brenda saw red. I am not finished, she shrieked. Without thinking, without processing the consequences, she reached out, grabbed his massive shoulder to spin him around, and swung her hand. Chapter 3. The Slap and the Spark. Smack. The sound was shockingly loud in the concrete echo chamber of the parking garage. Brenda's palm connected with the man's cheek. It wasn't a playful tap. It was a full-force, frustration-fueled slap that had the weight of a ruined Christmas behind it. Instant regret flooded her system. Oh my God, she thought. I just assaulted a stranger. I'm going to jail. Jane is going to have to bail me out. But the regret was quickly replaced by confusion. The moment her skin touched his, a jolt of electricity shot up her arm. It wasn't static shock. It felt like she had stuck a fork into a wall outlet. The air around them seemed to crackle and thicken, smelling suddenly of ozone and pine, and something musky and dangerous, like a forest after a storm. The man didn't stumble. He didn't even flinch. He froze. For a heartbeat, total silence reigned. The cars honking behind Brenda's abandoned Honda faded into the background. Slowly, terrifyingly slowly, the man turned his head back to face her. The smirk was gone. Brenda gasped and took a step back. His eyes were different. The icy blue was gone, swallowed by a sudden, molten flash of gold. His pupils had dilated until his eyes were almost entirely black, ringed by that glowing, unnatural yellow. He looked furious, but it wasn't the anger of a man who had been slapped. It was something primal, hunger, possessiveness. He let out a sound that wasn't a word. It was a low rumble originating deep in his chest, vibrating through the air so powerfully that Brenda felt it in her own teeth. It sounded like a growl, a literal animalistic growl. You, he rasped. His voice had changed too. It was rougher, like gravel grinding together. Brenda, realizing she might be in serious danger, tried to raise her hand again, not to slap him, but to defend herself. Look, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have. Before she could finish the sentence, he moved. He was faster than humanly possible. One moment he was standing 3 feet away, the next he was towering over her, his heat radiating off him like a furnace. His hand shot out and wrapped around her wrist. His grip was ironclad, inescapable, yet strangely not painful. He didn't squeeze to crush, he squeezed to hold, to anchor. The electric shock returned, stronger this time, pulsing between where his skin touched hers. Brenda's breath hitched. Her heart began to hammer a frantic rhythm against her ribs, but strangely, her fear was mutating into something else, something dizzying. He leaned down, bringing his face inches from her. She could smell him now, crisp snow, expensive cologne, and that underlying intoxicating musk that made her knees feel weirdly weak. He inhaled deeply, his nostrils flaring as he took in her scent. The gold in his eyes swirled. I needed a date, he murmured, his voice thick and strained, as if he was fighting for control over his own body. I needed a distraction. What? Brenda squeaked, her hyperverbal brain short-circuiting. I just wanted the parking spot. His grip on her wrist tightened slightly, pulling her half a step closer. He looked at her mouth, then back up to her wide, terrified eyes. You can have the spot, he growled, the sound sending shivers down her spine. But the price has changed. He leaned in until his lips brushed against the shell of her ear. "I'm taking you instead." Before Brenda could process what that meant, was he kidnapping her? Was he arresting her? A tow truck, bright yellow and bearing the logo Wolfram Recovery, roared around the corner, lights flashing. The man straightened up, the gold fading slightly from his eyes, but the intensity remaining. He gestured to the tow truck with his free hand, never letting go of Brenda's wrist. "That," he said, calmly, nodding at the truck which was now backing up toward Brenda's abandoned Honda, "that is my company, and that is your car blocking a fire lane." He looked back down at Brenda, a predatory glint returning to his gaze. "So, Brenda," he said, reading the ID badge clipped to her lapel, "you have a choice. You can let them tow your car to the impound lot, which doesn't open until December 27th. He paused, letting the threat hang in the cold air. "Or you can get in my car, accompany me to a party for 3 hours, and I will ensure your car is waiting for you, washed and detailed, with whatever gift you were running late for sitting in the passenger seat." Brenda stared at him. She looked at the tow truck hooking up her Civic. She looked at Fluffy's carrier in the front seat. She looked at the giant, terrifying, handsome lunatic holding her wrist. "Who are you?" she whispered. He smiled, and this time it was all teeth. "I'm Declan. Get in the car." Chapter 4. The Tow Truck Extortion. Brenda watched in horror as the hydraulic lift of the Wolfram Recovery truck whirred to life, hoisting the rear bumper of her beloved, dented Honda Civic into the air. "Wait! Stop!" she yelled, lunging forward, but Declan's hand was still clamped around her wrist, anchoring her to the spot. "My cat is in there. The watch receipt is in the glove box. You can't just abduct my vehicle." Declan didn't even look at the tow truck driver. He just held up 2 fingers and the driver froze the mechanism instantly. The power dynamic was terrifyingly absolute. "The cat," Declan said, his voice smooth and unyielding, "can come with us. The watch will be retrieved by my assistant and delivered directly to your father's doorstep within the hour. As for your car, I will ensure it remains untouched right here until you are ready to retrieve it, if you agree." Brenda turned to glare at him. The adrenaline was starting to mix with the caffeine in her system, creating a cocktail of pure vibration. "This is extortion. You know that, right? This is kidnapping with extra steps. I could sue you. I will sue you. I know lawyers who specialize in emotional distress caused by aggressive billionaires." Declan stepped closer. The heat radiating off him was distracting, cutting through the bitter chill of the parking garage. Up close, his eyes were still that unsettling, vivid blue, though the golden ring had faded back into the depths of his irises. "Brenda," he said, saying her name like he was tasting it, "look at the time." She glanced at her phone. 5:02 p.m. The jeweler was closed. "I missed it," she whispered, the fight draining out of her shoulders. "It's over. My dad is going to give me the disappointed sigh for the 3rd Christmas in a row." "Not if you agree," Declan said softly. He pulled a sleek black phone from his pocket. "I know the owner of the jewelry store. He leases the building from me. 1 phone call and he opens back up for my courier. Your father gets his gift." He dangled the offer like a piece of meat before a starving wolf, or more accurately, like a lifeline to a drowning crisis manager. Brenda looked at him. He was arrogant, pushy, and clearly used to getting his way, but he was also her only option. 1 night, she negotiated, narrowing her eyes. 3 hours max, no funny business. And if you murder me, my assistant Jane has a file on my laptop titled, "If I Go Missing, It Was the Rich Guy," and it will auto-upload to the FBI servers. Declan's lips twitched. A wise precaution. "Do we have a deal?" "Fine," she snapped, "but let go of my wrist. You're cutting off my circulation." He released her slowly, his fingers trailing against her skin for a fraction of a second longer than necessary. Brenda ignored the shiver that raced up her arm and marched to her suspended Honda. She wrestled the carrier out of the passenger seat. Inside, Fluffy was hissing and spitting, his orange fur puffed up to twice its normal size. "It's okay, Fluffy. We're going to a party with a psychopath because Mommy is a terrible driver." She turned back to Declan, lugging the carrier. "Okay, Gargoyle, lead the way, but if Fluffy gets carsick on your leather seats, that is an act of God and I am not liable." Declan looked at the carrier, then at Brenda. He opened the passenger door of the Aston Martin with a mock bow. "I'll take my chances," he said. "Get in." Chapter 5. The Ride to the Estate. The interior of the Aston Martin smelled like expensive leather, cedarwood, and whatever terrifyingly potent cologne Declan was wearing. It was a silent, hermetically sealed bubble of luxury moving through the snowy streets. Brenda sat in the passenger seat with the cat carrier on her lap, her knees pressed together. Declan wasn't driving. A man with a thick neck and a shaved head, introduced briefly as Mark, was behind the wheel. The tension in the car was thick enough to cut with a knife. Mark, the driver, was sweating, visibly. Beads of perspiration were forming on his forehead, despite the car's climate control being set to a comfortable 68 degrees. He kept gripping the steering wheel so hard his knuckles were white, and every few seconds his eyes would dart to the rearview mirror to look at Declan, then flick nervously to Brenda. "Are you okay, Mark?" Brenda asked, leaning forward slightly. "You look like you're having a cardiac event. Do I need to drive? I mean, obviously, based on recent events, I shouldn't drive, but you look clammy." Mark flinched. "I'm fine, ma'am, just the traffic." "The traffic is moving," Brenda pointed out. She turned to look at Declan in the back seat. He had insisted she sit up front while he sat in the back to make calls, which Brenda found weirdly formal. "Why is your driver terrified?" Brenda asked, twisting in her seat. Declan looked up from his phone. He had removed his suit jacket, revealing a white dress shirt that strained against his chest muscles. "Mark is not terrified. He is focused. He smells of fear," Brenda said, bluntly. "And Old Spice, but mostly fear." Declan's eyes met Mark's in the rearview mirror. A silent communication passed between them, something intense and heavy. Mark swallowed hard and focused rigidly on the road. What Brenda didn't know, what she couldn't know, was that the car was flooded with her scent. To Mark, a beta wolf, the smell of a human mate was overwhelming. It triggered instincts to protect, but also a deep primal fear because she belonged to the Alpha King. Being this close to another male's mate in an enclosed space was a biological taboo that made Mark's inner wolf want to curl up and die to avoid a challenge. "So," Brenda said, needing to fill the silence because silence gave her time to think about how insane the situation was, "what exactly is this gala? Is it a charity thing? A rich people patting themselves on the back thing? Do I need to know which fork to use, or is it finger foods?" "It is the annual Winter Solstice Gala for Wolfram Holdings. My family will be there, my business partners will be there." "Great, high stakes," Brenda muttered. "And why exactly do you need a fake date? You look like you were genetically engineered in a lab to sell underwear. I'm sure you have a line of supermodels waiting to accompany you." Declan's gaze darkened. He locked eyes with her over the headrest. "My grandmother," he said, "is insistent that I settle down. She has invited candidates, women of suitable lineage who wish to merge their assets with mine." "Ah," Brenda nodded sagely, "gold diggers." "Power seekers," Declan corrected. "They are intense. I need a buffer, someone who is not part of their world, someone who will not tolerate their posturing." He looked at her, a small, genuine smile touching his lips for the first time. "Someone who has the audacity to slap a king for taking a parking spot." Brenda flushed. "I told you I have low blood sugar, and you deserved it." "Perhaps," Declan murmured. Fluffy let out a low growl from inside the carrier. "Even the cat hates you," Brenda said triumphantly. "We shall see," Declan said. "We're here." The car turned off the main road and approached a set of massive iron gates. They swung open automatically, revealing a driveway that wound through a snowy forest for what felt like miles. "Okay," Brenda whispered, clutching the carrier. "Just a party. Get the watch, go home. Don't punch anyone else." Chapter 6. Arrival at Wolfram Manor. Wolfram Manor was a humble name for what was essentially a Gothic fortress dropped into the middle of a snowy landscape. The house was stone, massive, and covered in ivy that looked frozen in time. Turrets rose into the dark winter sky, and the windows glowed with a warm, golden light that spilled out onto the pristine snow. "Subtle," Brenda deadpanned as the Aston Martin pulled up to the main entrance. "Dracula would love it here. Does it come with a dungeon?" "Several," Declan said, dead serious. Mark opened the door for Brenda. She stepped out, the cold air biting at her cheeks. She was wearing her work outfit, a pencil skirt, a silk blouse, and a wool coat, which felt woefully underdressed for the opulent surroundings. A team of valets, all large, fit men who moved with the same eerie grace as Declan, swarmed the car. "Take the carrier," Declan ordered one of them. "No," Brenda protested, grabbing the handle. Fluffy is a support animal, an emotional support demon. He stays with me. I'm not leaving him in a coat check room. Declan sighed. Fine, bring the beast inside. They walked up the grand staircase. The heavy wooden doors were pushed open by two more guards. The foyer was cavernous, a chandelier the size of a small car hung from the ceiling. But what caught Brenda's attention wasn't the architecture, it was the people, or rather the staff. Everyone stopped. Dozens of servers and security guards froze as Declan walked in. They didn't just look at him, they lowered their heads, averting their eyes in a display of submission that made Brenda's skin crawl. Why is everyone acting like you're the Pope? Brenda whispered loudly. They respect the chain of command, Declan said vaguely. He gestured to the carrier. Let him out. He likely needs to stretch. He's going to run. He's going to scratch your antique rugs and pee on something expensive. Let him out. Brenda rolled her eyes and unzipped the carrier. Go on, Fluffy. Be free. Destroy something. Fluffy, the 20-pound ball of orange rage, waddled out of the carrier. He shook his fur, looked around the massive hall, and let out a hiss that sounded like a deflating tire. He looked at Brenda and narrowed his eyes, his tail twitching with irritation. Then he looked at Declan. Fluffy froze. His ears perked up. He sniffed the air, detecting the scent of the apex predator. In the animal kingdom, hierarchy was everything, and Fluffy, despite his domesticated obesity, knew a top dog when he saw one. To Brenda's absolute shock, Fluffy trotted over to Declan. He didn't scratch, he didn't bite. He rubbed his fluffy orange head affectionately against Declan's polished dress shoe and let out a purr that sounded like a diesel engine. Declan looked down, unamused. He seems fond of me. You have got to be kidding me, Brenda gasped, betrayed. I feed him, I scoop his poop, he bites my ankles for sport, and you just stand there menacingly and he falls in love? Declan reached down and scratched Fluffy behind the ears. The cat practically melted into a puddle of orange goo. Animals have good instincts, Declan said, smirking at Brenda. They know who provides safety. He's a traitor, Brenda muttered, crossing her arms. A fluffy orange Benedict Arnold. Come. Declan offered her his arm. The guests are waiting. And Brenda, what? Stay close to me, he said, his voice dropping an octave, the command woven into the words. The atmosphere tonight will be volatile. Brenda looked at the way he scratched the cat, then at the massive bicep he was offering her. She took his arm. It felt like holding on to a marble statue. Lead on, Your Highness. Let's get this over with. Chapter 7. The No-Touching Rule. The double doors to the grand ballroom opened, revealing a scene that looked like it had been ripped straight out of a Great Gatsby movie, if Gatsby had been a Viking warlord with a limitless budget. The room was vast, with vaulted ceilings that disappeared into shadows and walls lined with ancient tapestries depicting hunting scenes that were a little too graphic for Brenda's taste. The guests, hundreds of them, were immaculately dressed in velvet, silk, and sharp tuxedos. But despite the finery, the energy in the room was raw. It was loud, not with polite chatter, but with boisterous laughter and the clinking of heavy goblets. As Declan stepped onto the mezzanine with Brenda on his arm, the noise level dropped instantly. It didn't taper off, it was severed. Hundreds of heads turned upward, hundreds of eyes locked onto them. Brenda felt her stomach do a backflip. Okay, she whispered, her voice barely audible. This is intense. Why are they staring? Is there spinach in my teeth? Is Fluffy doing something unholy behind me? They are looking at you, murmured Declan, pulling her closer to his side, because you are with me. The heat of his body was searing through her coat. It was distracting. It made her want to lean into him, which was a biological betrayal she was not prepared to accept. She stopped walking, forcing him to pause at the top of the stairs. Okay, listen to me, Cujo, she hissed, turning to face him. If we are going to do this fake date thing, we need ground rules. I am a professional consultant. I have boundaries. Declan looked down at her, his expression unreadable, though a flicker of amusement danced in those golden-ringed eyes. Boundaries? Yes, boundaries, Brenda said firmly, counting on her fingers. Rule number 1, No growling at the waiters. It's rude. Rule number 2, we need to agree on a backstory. If anyone asks, we met at a library, a very quiet, non-violent library. And rule number 3, no unnecessary touching. Declan raised an eyebrow. No touching? Correct. No groping, no hand-holding unless absolutely necessary for the ruse, and definitely no sniffing my hair. I saw you doing it in the elevator. It's weird. Declan took a slow step toward her, encroaching on her personal space until the tips of his shoes touched hers. The air between them crackled with that same strange electricity from the parking garage. "You are supposed to be a couple, Brenda," he said, his voice a low rumble that vibrated in her chest. "Couples touch. It signals claim. It signals affection." "Well, fake it from a distance," she retorted, though her voice wavered slightly as he reached out. He ignored her rule immediately. His large, warm hands settled on the lapels of her wool coat. He didn't push her away. He pulled the coat tighter, adjusting the collar so it sat perfectly against her neck. His knuckles grazed the sensitive skin of her throat, sending a jolt of heat straight to her toes. You're breaking Rule 3, Brenda stammered, her brain foggy. "I am fixing your attire," he corrected. He leaned in, his mouth inches from her ear, and for a terrifying second, she thought he was going to bite her. Instead, he whispered, "And everyone in this room has exceptional hearing. If you want them to believe you belong to me, you need to let me touch you." Brenda looked down at the crowd. The guests were watching the interaction with attentive attention. Some looked terrified, others looked jealous, but they were all watching Declan's hands on her. "Fine," Brenda squeaked, "but only for the ruse." "Of course," Declan said, sliding his hand from her collar down to the small of her back, his palm burning through the silk of her blouse. He guided her down the stairs. Brenda tried to keep her head high, but she couldn't shake the feeling that she had walked into a lion's den wearing a dress made of steak. Chapter 8. Enter Grandmother Kate. 20 minutes into the gala, Brenda had managed to secure a glass of champagne and had successfully avoided making eye contact with anyone who looked like they might bite. She had deposited Fluffy with a terrified-looking valet named Keith, instructing him that the cat required constant verbal affirmation and was not to be fed cheese. Seeing the 6'2" valet holding the orange Persian like it was a live grenade had been the highlight of her night so far. "You are doing well," Declan said, appearing at her elbow like a stealth bomber. He had discarded his own coat, and his tuxedo fit him in a way that should be illegal in at least 12 states. "I'm surviving," Brenda corrected, taking a large gulp of champagne, "though I'm pretty sure that guy over by the shrimp cocktail just growled at a waiter for taking his plate." "That is Uncle Marcus," Declan said dismissively. "He is food aggressive. Ignored him." Before Brenda could unpack the phrase food aggressive applied to a human being, the crowd suddenly parted. It was like the Red Sea splitting, but with more velvet and fear. A hush fell over the room that was even deeper than when Declan had arrived. Walking through the cleared path was an elderly woman. She was tiny, barely 5 feet tall, with hair the color of steel wool pulled into a severe bun. She walked with a cane topped with a silver wolf's head, but she didn't seem to need it. She moved with a predatory grace that defied her age. "Oh no," Declan muttered under his breath. His hand tightened instinctively on Brenda's waist. "Who was that?" Brenda whispered. "The Queen of England?" "Worse," Declan said. "My grandmother, Kate." The woman stopped in front of them. Up close, her eyes were the same piercing blue as Declan's, sharp enough to cut diamonds. She radiated an aura of power that made the air feel heavy. Grandmother Kate looked Brenda up and down, her gaze lingering on Brenda's sensible boots, her messy bun, and the champagne glass she was clutching for dear life. It was an inspection, a judgment. Usually, people withered under Kate's stare. Grown men, alphas of other packs, had been known to stutter. But Brenda wasn't a wolf. She was a crisis manager who once told a senator to sit down and shut up on live television. And more importantly, Brenda had a weakness for vintage jewelry. "Oh my God," Brenda gasped, breaking the terrifying silence. Kate blinked, startled. "Excuse me?" Brenda stepped forward, ignoring the way Declan tensed beside her, and pointed a finger at the massive, sapphire-encrusted brooch pinned to the collar of Kate's high-necked dress. Is that a 1920s Art Deco piece? Brenda asked, her eyes wide with genuine admiration. The setting is platinum, right? I saw a similar one at an auction in Sotheby's last year, but the filigree work on this is infinitely superior. The craftsmanship is dying out, you know? Nobody does bezel settings like that anymore. The entire room seemed to hold its breath. Nobody spoke to Kate like that. Nobody approached her without permission. Kate stared at Brenda. She looked down at her brooch, then back up at the chaotic human woman who was currently critiquing her jewelry instead of trembling in fear. "It is," Kate said slowly, her voice raspy and dry. "It belonged to my great-grandmother. It was crafted in Paris." "Paris!" Brenda beamed. "I knew it. The French influence is obvious in the geometric symmetry. It's stunning. Honestly, it's the best thing I've seen all night. And I've seen a guy eat a chicken wing with the bone still in it." A corner of Kate's mouth twitched. It wasn't quite a smile, but it wasn't a snarl either. "You have an eye for detail, Declan," she said, shifting her gaze to her grandson, "and no survival instinct whatsoever." "I am aware," Declan said, sounding exhausted. Kate looked back at Brenda, her expression unreadable. "You may call me Kate. Do not spill that champagne on my carpet." "Wouldn't dream of it, Kate," Brenda saluted with her glass. As the matriarch walked away, the crowd exhaled collectively. "You," Declan whispered, leaning down to Brenda's ear, "are insane. She eats people for breakfast." "She's a nice old lady with great taste. You just need to know how to handle difficult personalities. It's all about finding common ground. Now, are there any pigs in the blanket? I'm starving." Chapter 9. The Gossip Twins. Brenda's quest for carbohydrates led her toward the massive buffet table on the far side of the room. Declan had been pulled aside by a group of serious-looking men in suits who were discussing territory borders and shipping routes, leaving Brenda to navigate the culinary landscape alone. She was hovering over a platter of rare roast beef, trying to find a piece that looked cooked enough to not moo at her, when she felt eyes on her. Not the general staring of the crowd, this was specific. It was close. She turned to her left. Standing shoulder to shoulder were two women who looked so identical they could have been clones. They had sleek blonde bobs, sharp noses, and were wearing matching emerald green dresses. They were staring at Brenda with an intensity that was frankly unnerving, and they were sniffing. Short, sharp inhales. Their noses twitched delicately. Hello," Brenda said, stepping back and discreetly checking her armpits. "Can I help you?" "She smells weird," the twin on the left said. Her voice was high and breathy. "Delicious," the twin on the right corrected, "but stressful, like high-grade anxiety and vanilla bean." "And coffee," the left twin added. "Stale coffee, but underneath that, mint and ozone. That's him." Definitely him. He's all over her. Brenda blinked rapidly. "Okay, first of all, rude. Second of all, who are you?" The twins blinked in unison. "We are Eve," said the left one, "and Evelyn," said the right one. "We work in HR," they said together. "Right, HR, of course. Do you guys always sniff the new hires, or is this a special holiday bonus?" Eve leaned in closer, invading Brenda's personal space. Her eyes were wide and unblinking. "Why did the Alpha bring you? You're so fragile. Your bones sound hollow." "My bones are calcium-rich, thank you very much," Brenda snapped, clutching her plate of roast beef. "And he brought me because I'm charming and delightful, and because he stole my parking spot." Evelyn gasped. "You fought the Alpha for a parking spot?" "She fought the Alpha," Eve whispered to Evelyn. "That explains the smell. Adrenaline, aggression. He likes that." "He loves that," Evelyn agreed. "Remember when he fired the VP of sales for being too agreeable? He hates pushovers." "He likes a chase," Eve nodded. "Ladies," Brenda interrupted, waving a hand in front of their faces, "I am standing right here, and for the record, I'm not chasing anyone. I'm here under duress. Now, unless you're going to critique my cholesterol levels next, I'm going to find some cheese." She tried to step around them, but they moved with that same weird liquid grace, blocking her path. "Be careful," Eve said, her voice dropping to a serious whisper. "Stephen is here." "Stephen?" asked Brenda. "Who is Stephen?" "The rival, Darklyn." "The rival," Evelyn said darkly. "He smells like rot and expensive cologne. He doesn't like humans. He thinks we should be—" She made a gesture that involved slicing her finger across her throat. "Snacks," Eve clarified. Brenda felt a cold chill that had nothing to do with the drafty castle. Okay, good to know. Avoid Stephen, avoid the twins, eat cheese. Great plan. "We like you," Eve said suddenly, smiling a smile that showed a few too many teeth. "You're funny. We'll sit with you at dinner." "Oh, joy," Brenda muttered. As she hurried away from the HR twins, she couldn't shake the feeling that she had stumbled into a cult, a very wealthy, very well-dressed cult that was obsessed with how she smelled. She scanned the room for Declan. She needed her fake boyfriend. She needed his terrifying presence to scare away the sniffers. She spotted him across the room, towering over the men he was speaking to. His eyes locked onto hers instantly across the crowded hall. The connection was visceral. Even from 50 feet away, she felt that tug, that invisible rope pulling her toward him. He didn't smile, but he nodded once. A check-in. "I see you. You're safe." Brenda let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. "Okay, just 2 more hours. You can do this, Brenda. Just don't get eaten." Chapter 10. The Mistletoe Mishap. Brenda navigated the sea of velvet and tuxedos with the determination of a salmon swimming upstream, her eyes locked on Declan. He was her anchor in this ocean of weirdly aggressive, sniffing aristocrats. She was halfway to him when a young man with a terrified expression and an ill-fitting suit stepped directly into her path. It was Keith, the intern she had briefly met at the coat check. He was holding a long pole with a sprig of greenery dangling from the end, looking like a medieval executioner who had forgotten his axe and brought a shrubbery instead. "Excuse me," Brenda said, stepping to the left. Keith stepped to the left. "Keith, honey, you're blocking the egress," Brenda said, her crisis manager voice slipping out. "I need to get to the Alpha before I have a panic attack." It's tradition, Miss Brenda," Keith stammered, his eyes darting nervously toward the ceiling. Brenda looked up. Directly above her head, suspended by Keith's trembling pole, was a massive bunch of mistletoe. It wasn't the cute plastic stuff you buy at the pharmacy. This was real, wild mistletoe, complete with white berries that looked suspiciously like tiny skulls. At that exact moment, Declan materialized. He didn't walk, he just appeared, stepping into the space beside Brenda as if summoned by the vegetation. The crowd went silent, again. Brenda was starting to realize that silence was the default setting for these people whenever anything remotely interesting happened. Declan looked up at the mistletoe. He looked down at Brenda. His eyes were dark, the blue almost swallowed by black. The air between them instantly grew heavy, charged with that same static electricity that had short-circuited Brenda's brain in the parking garage. "Tradition," Declan murmured. He didn't sound opposed to the idea. In fact, he looked like a wolf who had just been served a prime rib on a silver platter. The crowd watched, breathless. The HR twins, Eve and Evelyn, were practically vibrating with excitement nearby. "Kiss her," someone whispered loudly. Brenda's heart hammered against her ribs. Kiss him? Here, in front of his grandmother and half of the werewolf population of the tri-state area? It would violate rule number 3, no unnecessary touching, so hard the rulebook would catch fire. But looking at Declan's lips, which were objectively very sculpted and very inviting, Brenda felt a dangerous urge to lean in. The pull of the bond was a physical weight, dragging her toward him. "No," her brain screamed. "He is a stranger. He extorted you with a tow truck. Do not kiss the gargoyle." Panic, cold and sharp, flooded her system. She needed an out. She needed a distraction. "Oh my God!" Brenda suddenly shrieked, pointing toward the buffet table. "Is that a tray of puff pastry falling?" It wasn't, but in her flailing attempts to create a diversion, Brenda spun around, her arms swinging out wildly. Her hand connected with the tray of a passing waiter. Crash! The tray, loaded with dozens of delicate shrimp cocktails in heavy crystal glasses, went airborne. It was a disaster in slow motion. Shrimp flew like pink missiles. Cocktail sauce sprayed in a magnificent red arc. Crystal shattered against the marble floor with the sound of 1,000 wind chimes dying. One particularly saucy shrimp landed with a wet splat right on the lapel of Declan's pristine tuxedo. The room froze. Keith dropped the mistletoe pole. Brenda stood amidst the wreckage, a piece of shrimp caught in her hair. She looked at the devastation, then slowly turned to Declan. He was looking down at the cocktail sauce staining his jacket, his expression unreadable. "Whoops," Brenda squeaked. I thought I saw a bee." Declan slowly picked the shrimp off his lapel. He looked at it, then at Brenda. The corner of his mouth twitched. He wasn't angry. He was fighting back a laugh. "A bee," he repeated, his voice dry. "In December, inside a stone fortress. Climate change, it's a real problem." Declan shook his head, the amusement in his eyes softening the hard lines of his face. He reached out, not to strangle her, but to gently pluck the shrimp from her hair. "Come," he said, taking her elbow. "Let's get you seated before you destroy the structural integrity of the building." Chapter 11. The Feast. The grand dining hall was a long, cavernous room, dominated by a table that seemed to stretch on for miles. It was set with heavy silverware, black candles, and goblets that looked like they belonged in a King Arthur reenactment. Brenda was seated at the head of the table, to Declan's immediate right. This was apparently a position of high honor, which mostly meant she was on display for everyone to stare at, while she tried to figure out which of the 5 forks was the shrimp disaster apology fork. To her left sat Grandmother Kate, who was currently dissecting a dinner roll with surgical precision. Across from her were the gossip twins, Eve and Evelyn, who were watching Brenda chew with unsettling intensity. "So," Brenda whispered to Declan, leaning in close, "is the food usually this ominous?" "The food is traditional," Declan replied, taking a sip of dark red wine. "We honor the hunt." "Great," Brenda muttered. "I love a good hunt. I once hunted for a discount blonder in a clearance bin for 45 minutes. The doors to the kitchen swung open, and a parade of servers marched out. They carried massive silver platters, the smell of roasted meat filling the air. Brenda's stomach growled. She was starving. The shrimp incident had only whetted her appetite. A server placed a plate in front of her. Brenda looked down. On the plate sat a steak, a very large steak. It was seared on the outside, but as she watched, a pool of red liquid began to form around the edges. It wasn't rare. It was practically still grazing in the pasture. There were no sides, no potatoes, no green beans, just a slab of meat the size of a hubcap. She looked around. Everyone else was digging in with gusto. The twins were tearing into their steaks with a speed that was frankly alarming. Grandmother Kate was slicing hers with elegant savagery. Brenda said, her voice echoing slightly in the silence. The chewing stopped. All eyes turned to her. "Is there a problem?" Declan asked, pausing with his fork halfway to his mouth. "It's lovely," Brenda lied, smiling weakly. "Truly a masterpiece of protein. But I was wondering, is there a salad? Or maybe a potato? A carrot? Any form of vegetation at all?" The silence that followed was heavy. The servers looked terrified. The guests looked confused. To a room full of werewolves, asking for a salad at the winter solstice feast was like asking for a glass of water at a wine tasting. It just wasn't done. "Vegetables?" a nearby alpha asked, looking at her like she had grown a second head. "Why would you want to eat the food's food?" Brenda felt her face heating up. "Because I have a human digestive tract, and if I eat 2 pounds of raw beef, I will die. I will literally perish right here in this chair. Is that what you want? A dead date?" She turned to Declan, giving him her best "fix this or I'm leaving" glare. Declan set down his fork. He wiped his mouth with a linen napkin and turned to the head server, a trembling man named Giles. "Giles." "Yes, Alpha," he squeaked. "My date requires fiber," Declan said, the words sounding strange in his deep voice. "Bring her a salad and potatoes, roasted, immediately." "But Alpha," Giles stammered, "the chef didn't prepare—" Declan's eyes flashed gold, just a flicker. "Then the chef will improvise. Go." Giles vanished into the kitchen as if he had been shot out of a cannon. Brenda sat back, crossing her arms. Thank you. Was that hearts? Declan murmured. You are high maintenance, though he cut a piece of his own steak and placed it on her plate. Eat a little, for protein, while you wait for your leaves. Brenda looked at the piece he had offered her. It was cooked perfectly, medium rare actually, warmer than the rest, a choice cut. She realized with a start that he had given her the best bite from his own plate. Fine, she said, spearing the meat, but if I get gout, I'm suing you. Chapter 12. The Rival Approaches. The salad had arrived, a sad collection of iceberg lettuce and a hastily baked potato, and Brenda was happily consuming it when the atmosphere in the room shifted. It wasn't the warm, chaotic energy of the feast anymore. The temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. The chatter died down, replaced by the scraping of silverware and tense whispers. The heavy double doors at the far end of the hall banged open. Walking in was a man who looked like the evil version of a romance novel cover model. He was tall, blonde, and wearing a white suit that was a little too tight and a lot too shiny. He walked with a swagger that screamed, "I own a yacht I can't afford." Behind him walked a small entourage of grim-faced men. "Stephen," Declan growled. The sound came from deep in his chest, a low vibration that made the silverware on the table rattle. Brenda swallowed a piece of potato. "Let me guess. The villain?" "The rival," Declan corrected, his hand tightening around his goblet until the metal groaned. "He controls the Southern Territory. He was not invited." Stephen strutted up to the head table, ignoring the hundreds of glares directed at him. He stopped right in front of Declan and Brenda. "Declan," Stephen said, his voice oily and smooth. "Enjoying the feast, I see? Always so rustic in the north." "Stephen," Declan replied, not standing up, "you are trespassing. Leave before I have Mark escort you out through a window." Stephen laughed, a sharp, unpleasant sound. "Hostile, as always. I just came to pay my respects to Grandmother Kate." He nodded at the old woman, who ignored him completely to focus on her wine. Then Stephen's eyes landed on Brenda. He looked her up and down, his lip curling in a sneer. He took in her chaotic bun, her sensible work clothes, and the plate of half-eaten salad. "And who is this?" Stephen asked, gesturing to her with a dismissive wave of his hand. "I didn't know you were adopting strays, Declan. Or did you run out of actual wolves to date? She smells like office supplies and fear." The insult hung in the air. The entire room waited for Declan to rip Stephen's throat out. Declan's knuckles were white, his muscles coiled to spring. But before the alpha could move, Brenda wiped her mouth with her napkin and stood up. She wasn't tall, barely 5'4" in her boots, but she projected her voice with the clarity of someone who had managed press conferences during oil spills. "Excuse me, Stephen, was it?" she asked, her tone bright and professional. "Yes?" Stephen blinked, surprised that the stray was speaking. Brenda stepped around the table, walking right up to him. She looked at his suit. She squinted. She reached out and flicked his lapel. "Polyester blend?" she asked loudly. "At a solstice gala? Bold choice. Very budget conscious." Stephen spluttered. "This is custom Italian silk. It's shiny, Steve," Brenda said, shaking her head sympathetically. "And not in a good way. It catches the light and highlights your pores. Also, your tie is a half-inch too wide for your lapel width. It throws off your entire proportion. You look like a used car salesman trying to sell me a lemon." Someone at the back of the room snorted. Stephen's face turned a violent shade of red. "Listen here, you little human." "No, you listen," Brenda interrupted, stepping closer, her finger poking his chest. "You walked into a private event, uninvited, insulted the host, and insulted the food. In my line of work, we call that a PR suicide. Now, turn around, take your knockoff suit back to whatever swamp you crawled out of, and let the adults finish their dinner." She smiled. It was a shark's smile. "Or do I need to call the health inspector and report a pest infestation?" Dead silence. Then a low, rumbling sound filled the room. It was laughter. Declan was laughing. He wasn't roaring, he was chuckling, a deep, genuine sound of amusement that softened his terrifying aura. He looked at Brenda with an expression that wasn't just possessive anymore, it was awestruck. Stephen looked around, realizing he was being mocked. His eyes narrowed, flashing a sickly yellow. "You'll regret that," he hissed at Brenda. "I regret this conversation already," Brenda deadpanned. She turned her back on him and sat down. "Pass the salt, Declan." Declan handed her the salt shaker, his eyes glowing gold. "With pleasure, Brenda." Chapter 13. The Threat. The adrenaline rush of humiliating a villain in a shiny suit eventually wore off, replaced by a pressing biological reality. Brenda needed to use the ladies' room. "I'll be right back," she whispered to Declan. "Don't start a war while I'm gone, and if the dessert cart comes by, secure me a creme brulee. Hostile takeover if necessary." Declan looked reluctant to let her leave his side. His hand hovered near her lower back, his golden-rimmed eyes scanning the room. "I should accompany you." "To the bathroom?" Brenda raised an eyebrow. "Declan, we've been fake dating for 2 hours. Let's not move in together just yet. I'll be fine. It's down the hall, past the suit of armor that looks like it's judging me." He hesitated, then nodded slowly. "Mark is by the door. Holler if you need anything." "I'm just going to pee, not conquer a nation," she quipped, grabbing her purse. Brenda navigated her way out of the grand dining hall, slipping into the cooler, quieter corridor. The noise of the feast faded behind the heavy oak doors. The hallway was dimly lit by flickering sconces, the stone walls exuding a chill that seeped through her blouse. She found the restroom, a cavernous space with marble sinks and gold fixtures, and took a moment to splash cold water on her face. "Okay, Brenda," she told her reflection, "you are killing it. You insulted a guy named Stephen, you ate protein, and you haven't been mauled yet. Just 2 more hours. Then you get your car, you get the watch, and you go home to Fluffy." She dried her hands and stepped back out into the hallway. She didn't make it 3 steps before a shadow detached itself from a tapestry. It was Stephen. He wasn't smiling anymore. The oily, used car salesman persona was gone, replaced by something much darker and far more dangerous. He blocked her path, leaning casually against the stone wall, but his muscles were coiled tight. "Going somewhere, little human?" he asked. His voice had lost its smooth veneer. It was rough, grating like sandpaper on stone. "The dining hall, actually. Declan gets lonely if I'm gone too long. Separation anxiety. It's very tragic." She tried to step around him, but Stephen moved with that same blurring speed she had seen in the parking garage. He was in front of her instantly, backing her into a heavy wooden sideboard. "You have a sharp tongue," Stephen sneered, leaning down. Up close, he smelled like heavy musk and rot, a stark contrast to Declan's scent of pine and snow. "You don't know, do you, what you are?" "I'm a consultant," Brenda said, her voice shaking slightly but holding firm, "and I charge a very high hourly rate for conversations I don't want to have." Stephen laughed, a low, cruel sound. He reached out and grabbed a lock of her hair, sniffing it. Brenda recoiled, slapping his hand away. "Don't touch me," she snapped. "He hasn't told you," Stephen realized, his eyes gleaming with malicious delight. "The mating bond. It's pouring off you like perfume. A human mate. It's pathetic. Weak." "I don't know what you're talking about," Brenda said, backing up until her hips hit the sideboard. "But if you don't move, I'm going to scream." "Scream," Stephen challenged, his eyes flashing a sickly yellow. "The walls are thick, and by the time Declan gets here, I'll have already snapped your pretty little neck. That's the thing about mates, Brenda. They are the alpha's greatest strength and their only fatal weakness. If I break you, I break him." He lunged. Chapter 14. The Shift. Inside the dining hall, Declan was staring at the empty chair beside him. He hadn't taken a bite since Brenda left. His entire being was focused on the faint, rhythmic sound of her heartbeat echoing down the hall. To a lichen of his power, a mate's heartbeat was louder than a drum. Thump, 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 thump. It was steady, calm. Then it spiked. Thump, 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 thump. Declan's head snapped up, his nostrils flared, inhaling deeply. Beneath the scent of roasted meat and wine, he caught it. Fear, sharp, acrid, unmistakable fear, and underneath it, the rotting stench of Stephen. Thump, thump, thump. The sound of her heart was now a frantic bird beating against a cage. A low growl started in Declan's chest, involuntary and terrifying. The conversation at the nearby tables died instantly. Grandmother Kate looked up, her fork pausing halfway to her mouth. "Declan?" she warned softly. "He touched her," Declan snarled. The human facade he had been maintaining for the sake of the gala shattered. The beast didn't just wake up, it took the wheel. Declan stood up so abruptly, his heavy oak chair flew backward and smashed into the stone floor. He didn't walk to the doors, he launched himself. He vaulted over the table, scattering goblets and plates, landing in a crouch that was entirely animalistic. His tuxedo jacket ripped at the seams as his shoulders expanded, the fabric unable to contain the rapid swelling of muscle. "Stephen!" he roared. The sound wasn't human. It was a sonic boom of rage that shook the stained glass windows in their frames. He reached the double doors at the end of the hall. They were closed. He didn't open them. With a momentum that defied physics, Declan lowered his shoulder and slammed into the solid oak. Wood splintered with the sound of a gunshot. The massive doors were ripped from their iron hinges, flying into the hallway like matchsticks. In the corridor, Stephen had Brenda pinned against the wall, his hand around her throat. Seeing Declan burst through the doors, half man, half nightmare, surrounded by a cloud of wooden debris, Stephen froze. Declan was changing. His face was elongating, his jaw unhinging to reveal elongated canines. His hands had turned into massive clawed paws. His eyes were twin suns of burning gold. He didn't pause to negotiate. He crossed the distance in a blur of violence. He grabbed Stephen by the back of his neck and the waist of his shiny trousers and lifted him into the air. With a roar that vibrated Brenda's very bones, Declan threw the rival alpha. Stephen flew 20 feet down the hall, crashing through a display case of antique vases before slamming into the stone wall with a sickening crunch. Declan stood over Brenda, his chest heaving. He was breathing hard, steam rising from his skin. His hands were still claws. Dark fur was visible along his jawline and wrists. He spun around to face her, ready to destroy anything else that threatened her. "Mine," he gutturally roared, the word barely intelligible through his shifted vocal cords. Chapter 15. The Realization. Brenda was pressed against the sideboard, clutching her throat where Stephen's hand had been just seconds ago. Her heart was beating so fast she thought she might pass out, but she didn't. Her brain, honed by years of managing corporate disasters, did the one thing it knew how to do. It analyzed. She looked at the shattered doors lying on the floor. She looked at Stephen, groaning in a pile of broken porcelain down the hall. She looked at Declan. Or what used to be Declan. The man standing in front of her was terrifying. He was huge, easily 7 feet tall now, hunched over with muscle mass that didn't make anatomical sense. His tuxedo shirt was in ribbons hanging off his torso. His hands, those weren't hands. They were tipped with black curved talons the length of steak knives. And his face. His jaw was square and jutting, lined with dark bristle. His teeth were sharp points glistening with saliva. His eyes were glowing gold, devoid of any human white. The silence in the hallway was absolute, save for the heavy, rasping breath of the monster in front of her. Brenda didn't scream. Screaming was for people who didn't have a plan. Instead, her mind started clicking through the data points of the evening like a high-speed processor. Data point 1, the parking spot incident. He didn't just get mad, he growled. He lifted a tow truck driver with one hand. Data point 2, the no-touching rule he broke constantly, the sniffing, the obsession with her scent. Data point 3, the dinner, raw meat, the refusal to eat vegetables. We honor the hunt. Data point 4, Fluffy, her cat who hated everyone, submitted to him instantly. Animals know predators. Data point 5, the terminology, alpha, pack, mate. The pieces slammed together into a picture that was impossible, yet undeniable. "You're a dog," Brenda whispered, her voice trembling. Declan flinched. The gold in his eyes swirled. He took a step toward her, his claws retracting slightly, but he stopped when he saw her press herself flatter against the wall. He looked terrified, not of Stephen, but of her reaction. "Wolf," he rasped, his voice sounding like two boulders grinding together. "Lichen." "A werewolf," Brenda corrected, her eyes wide. "Like in the movies, except better dressed." She looked at his hands again. "You ripped a door off its hinges. You threw a grown man like a frisbee." "He touched you," he said. It was a simple statement, but it carried the weight of a death sentence. "He threatened mate." "Mate?" Brenda repeated. She slid down the wall until she was sitting on the floor, her legs suddenly unable to support her weight. "I put my head between my knees," Brenda mumbled into her skirt. "I slapped a werewolf in a parking garage. I should be dead. Why am I not dead?" Declan knelt in front of her. He was slowly shrinking back to human size, the fur receding, the claws dulling back into fingernails, though his eyes remained gold. He didn't touch her. He looked like he was afraid she would break if he did. "Brenda," he said, his voice regaining some of his human timbre, "please do not run. It is freezing outside. You will die." Brenda lifted her head. She looked at the wreckage of the hallway. She looked at the monster kneeling before her, looking at her with an expression of utter, devastating devotion. "Run?" Brenda let out a hysterical little laugh. "Declan, you just threw a man through a wall for pulling my hair, and you have a heated car. I'm not running anywhere." She pointed a shaking finger at him. "But you owe me a very, very long PowerPoint presentation and a stiff drink." Chapter 16. The Extraction. The silence that followed Brenda's request for a drink and a PowerPoint presentation was broken by the sound of slow, deliberate clapping. Grandmother Kate stood at the end of the shattered hallway, framed by the jagged remains of the oak doorframe. She didn't look horrified. She didn't look surprised. She looked resigned, like a woman who had seen this exact scenario play out too many times before. "Excellent form on the throw, Declan," Kate said dryly, tapping her cane on the stone floor. "Though I do wish you hadn't destroyed the Ming vase. It survived 2 world wars, only to be taken out by a jealous grandson." Declan, who was currently kneeling on the floor in a shredded tuxedo shirt, bowed his head slightly. "He touched her, grandmother." "I saw," Kate said. She turned her sharp gaze to Stephen, who was currently groaning in a heap of drywall and porcelain dust. 2 large security guards, wolves, judging by their size, were already scooping him up like a bag of trash. "Get him out of here. Dump him at the southern border. Tell his pack if he crosses the line again, I will turn him into a rug." The guards nodded and dragged the moaning rival away. Kate walked over to Brenda, who was still sitting on the floor clutching her purse. "And you," Kate said, peering down at her, "you are taking this remarkably well. Most humans are screaming by now, or fainting. The fainting is very tedious." "I'm in shock," Brenda said matter-of-factly. "My brain has filed this under hallucination due to low blood sugar. I expect to wake up in my Honda any minute now." "Unlikely," Kate said. She looked at Declan. "Get her out of here. The guests are smelling blood and pheromones. It's about to get rowdy. Go to the city. I'll handle the cleanup." Declan stood up. He offered a hand to Brenda. Brenda looked at the hand, large, calloused, but currently free of claws. She took it. He pulled her up with a gentleness that was at odds with the violence she had just witnessed. "My cat," Brenda said suddenly. "I can't leave Fluffy. He's with Keith the valet. Keith looked emotionally unstable. I need to rescue my cat." "Mark has the car," Declan said, wrapping his ruined tuxedo jacket around her shoulders. It was enormous, engulfing her completely and smelling intensely of him, cedar, snow, and raw power. They walked out through the side entrance, avoiding the main ballroom where the murmur of hundreds of confused werewolves was rising like a tide. Outside, the cold air was a slap in the face, sharp and grounding. The snow was falling harder now, thick white flakes that muffled the world. The Aston Martin was idling at the curb. Mark was standing by the open door, looking even more terrified than he had earlier. He kept his eyes strictly on the ground, avoiding looking at Declan, whose golden eyes were still glowing in the dark. "In," Declan ordered gently, guiding her into the passenger seat. Brenda climbed in. There, sitting on the heated leather seat, was the carrier. "Meow," Fluffy said. It was a complaint. "I know, buddy. I know. It's been a weird night. You missed the part where the nice man turned into a Wookiee." Declan slid into the back seat again, though this time the separation felt less like a chauffeur situation and more like a safety precaution. He needed space to cool down. "Go," Declan growled to Mark. "Penthouse, fast." The car peeled out of the driveway, tires crunching on the snow, leaving the fortress of Wolfram Manor behind. Brenda watched the castle disappear in the rearview mirror, feeling like she was leaving reality behind it with it. Chapter 17. The Explanation. The drive to the city was silent, but it wasn't empty. The air in the car was thick, heavy with unspoken questions and the lingering scent of ozone. They pulled into the private underground garage of a sleek glass skyscraper in the heart of the metropolis. Mark parked the car and practically sprinted away the moment the engine was off, clearly desperate to be anywhere else. Declan carried the cat carrier. Brenda carried her shoes, which she had taken off somewhere in the elevator because her feet hurt. The penthouse was exactly what Brenda expected. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the snowy city, modern furniture that looked uncomfortable, and a fireplace big enough to roast a hog. It was cold, sterile, and expensive. Declan set the carrier down. He turned to face her. He was still wearing the tattered remains of his shirt. The fabric hung in strips, revealing a chest that looked like it had been carved out of marble. Scars, faint, silver lines, crisscrossed his skin, telling stories Brenda wasn't sure she wanted to hear. "So," Brenda said, standing in the middle of the living room in her socks, "here we are, the wolf's lair, literally." "Brenda," Declan started, taking a step toward her. "Stay there," she said, holding up a hand. "I need space and data. I need you to explain, in clear, concise sentences, exactly what is happening. Use small words if you have to. I'm a liberal arts major." Declan sighed. He ran a hand through his hair, looking tired. The gold in his eyes had finally faded back to that piercing blue. "I am a lichen. We have existed alongside humanity for thousands of years. We hide in plain sight. We run corporations, we hold office, we exist." "Okay," Brenda nodded. "Secret Society of Wolf People." "Got it. Go on." "We are biological creatures. We have instincts, hierarchy, and mates." He said the word with a reverence that made Brenda's stomach to a flip. "Mates," Brenda repeated. "Like soulmates?" "More than that," Declan said, his voice dropping. "It is biological, genetic. When a wolf finds his mate, it is absolute. There is no choice. There is no other option. The scent, your scent, it rewires my brain. It tells my wolf that you are the center of the universe, that protecting you is the only thing that matters." Brenda stared at him. "So, let me get this straight. You stole my parking spot?" "Fate put me in that spot," Declan interrupted. "You stole the spot," Brenda insisted, "and then I slapped you and that triggered it?" "Physical contact accelerates the bond," Declan admitted. "When you touched me, I knew. My wolf knew. That is why I could not let you go. If you had walked away, I would have followed you. I would have tracked you to the ends of the earth. I physically cannot be apart from you right now. It hurts." He touched his chest, right over his heart. "It is a physical pain." Brenda processed this. She looked at this billionaire tycoon, this apex predator, who was looking at her like she was the only source of oxygen in the room. "So, I'm basically catnip?" "You are my life," he corrected. "That's a lot of pressure for a first date, Declan. I haven't even seen your Netflix queue yet. What if we're incompatible? What if you snore? What if you chew with your mouth open?" "I do not snore," offended Declan, "and none of that matters. We will adapt. We are fated." "Fated," Brenda scoffed, pacing the room. I'm a consultant, Declan. I don't believe in fate. I believe in logistics, risk management, and quarterly projections. This is chaos. Life is chaos, Declan said softly. I can offer you order. I can offer you protection. No one will ever hurt you again. No one will ever steal a parking spot from you again. Brenda stopped pacing. She looked at him. You're really trying to sell this with the parking spot angle, aren't you? It seems to be your primary motivator, he said with a straight face. Brenda looked at Fluffy, who had let himself out of the carrier and was currently sharpening his claws on a $10,000 Italian leather sofa. Fluffy, Brenda yelled. Let him, Declan said. He can shred the whole couch. I'll buy a factory that makes couches. Brenda looked at Declan, then at the couch, then back at Declan. Okay, she whispered. Okay, this is insane, but I'm not running. Chapter 18. Crisis Mode. The acceptance of her new reality didn't come with tears or hugging. It came with a clipboard. Brenda found a notepad and a pen in Declan's minimalist office and marched back into the living room. She sat on the coffee table, looking like a judge in a courtroom. All right, she said, clicking the pen. If we are doing this, and I'm not saying we are, but if we are, we need to manage this crisis. I need a full assessment of the situation. Declan watched her, fascinated. He had expected screaming. He had expected her to call the police. Instead, she was treating his lycanthropy like a PR scandal. First, Brenda said, writing furiously, dietary requirements. You eat raw meat. Is that a preference or a necessity? Because my grocery budget is set up for pasta and clearance wine. High protein is preferred, Declan answered, suppressing a smile. I can eat cooked food, but my metabolism is fast. Noted. Massive grocery bill. I'll bill that to your company, she scribbled. Second, shedding. Do you shed? As a human, I mean, or as a wolf, because I have a lint roller budget that is already strained by Fluffy. I do not shed in human form, Declan said solemnly. Good. Third, the moon. She pointed the pen at him. Full moons. Do you turn into a mindless killing machine? Do I need to lock you in a basement? Do I need silver bullets? Silver is a myth. It's just a soft metal, useless. And on full moons, the urge to shift is stronger, yes, but I am not mindless, unless I am provoked. Provoked how? If someone threatens what is mine, he said, his eyes darkening. Brenda paused. She felt a blush creeping up her neck. Right. Okay. Protective instincts set to maximum. Got it. She tapped the pen against her chin. Fourth, employment. I have a job. I have a boss, Gerald. He is a nightmare. I cannot just quit to be a wolf queen? Luna, Declan supplied. And you do not have to quit, but Gerald will treat you with respect, or I will buy his company and fire him. You can't just buy everything, Declan. I have significant liquidity. It is the easiest solution. We are going to work on your conflict resolution skills, Brenda muttered, writing anger management on the list. She looked at her list. It was ridiculous. It was impossible. But looking at Declan, standing there in his ruined shirt, looking at her with that terrifying, unwavering intensity, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Safe. In a city that never slept, in a job that demanded everything from her, in a life that felt like a constant uphill battle, she felt completely, utterly safe. Okay, Brenda sighed, ripping the page off the notepad. That's the initial assessment. Phase 1 is complete. What is Phase 2? Declan asked, stepping closer. Phase 2, Brenda said, rubbing her temples, is caffeine. I need an espresso, a double, or I am going to pass out. I have an espresso machine. It is complicated. Italian. I can operate anything with buttons, Brenda declared, sliding off the table. Show me the machine, and then maybe you can find a shirt. You're distracting me. Declan grinned. It wasn't the scary wolf grin this time. It was a boyish, charming grin. Distracting? He teased. Yes, Brenda snapped, marching toward the kitchen. Cover up your abs, wolf boy. We have work to do. Chapter 19. Fluffy's Betrayal. The espresso machine, a chrome monstrosity that looked like it belonged on the dashboard of a spaceship, hissed violently as Brenda wrestled with a portafilter. "You need to apply equal pressure," Declan's voice rumbled from the doorway. He had changed, thankfully, into a pair of gray sweatpants and a tight black t-shirt that did absolutely nothing to hide the fact that he was built like a tank. "I am applying pressure," Brenda gritted out, her knuckles white. "I am applying the pressure of a woman who has been awake for 18 hours and has discovered magic is real. It's a specific kind of torque." The machine finally yielded, dripping dark, life-giving liquid into a cup. Brenda inhaled the fumes like oxygen. The elevator chimed in the hallway. "That will be Mark," Declan said, moving toward the door. "He went to your apartment to retrieve your overnight bag and the rest of the beast's supplies." Brenda followed him, coffee in hand. Mark stood in the entryway, looking pale and keeping his eyes strictly on the floor. He held a floral print duffel bag in one hand and a bag of premium cat litter in the other. "Thank you, Mark," said Brenda, stepping forward to take the bag. "Did you have any trouble? My neighbor, Mrs. Higgins, watches the hallway like a hawk. She probably thought you were a burglar." "She did interrogate me, ma'am," Mark said, his voice trembling slightly. "I hit me with a broom. I told her I was a courier." "Classic Higgins," Brenda nodded. "Sorry about the shins." Mark practically threw the bags down and fled back to the elevator, muttering something about alpha pheromones and hazard pay. Brenda unzipped the bag. "Okay, let's see. Pajamas, toothbrush, clean underwear. Good, Mark is efficient." She looked around the living room. "Where is Fluffy?" "He is inspecting his domain," Declan said, gesturing to the expansive living area. They found Fluffy atop the highest point in the room, the mantelpiece above the roaring fireplace. The orange Persian looked down at them with the disdain of a monarch surveying his peasants. "Fluffy," Brenda called out, putting on her best cat mom voice. "Come here, baby. Mommy has treats. Come to mommy." Fluffy blinked. He looked at Brenda. He looked at the bag of treats she was shaking. He yawned, a wide, pink display of indifference, and began to groom his paw. "He hates me," Brenda sighed. "I saved him from a shelter. I hand-fed him when he had a cold, and this is the thanks I get?" Declan walked over to the fireplace. He didn't use a baby voice. He didn't shake a bag of treats. He simply stood there, crossed his massive arms, and looked up. "Descend," Declan said. One word. Low, authoritative, commanding. Fluffy's ears perked up. The cat immediately stopped grooming, stood up, and hopped down from the mantelpiece, landing gracefully on the rug. He trotted over to Declan, weaving between the alpha's ankles and purring so loudly it sounded like a small engine idling. Brenda stared, her mouth hanging open. "You have got to be kidding me." "He respects hierarchy," Declan said, simply, reaching down to scratch the cat exactly where he liked it, right behind the ears. Fluffy closed his eyes in ecstasy. "He's doing it again," Brenda accused, pointing a finger at the cat. "Just like at the manor. You're a sellout, Fluffy. You're trading loyalty for proximity to power. You're a political opportunist." Declan smirked. "He feels the pack bond. He knows I am the alpha. Therefore, he feels safe with me. It's instinct." "It's betrayal," Brenda corrected, taking a sip of her espresso. "Pure, unadulterated treason. I hope you know he snores, and he has gas when he eats too fast. Enjoy your new best friend." Declan scooped the 20-pound cat up into his arms. Fluffy, who usually shredded Brenda's forearms if she tried to hold him for more than 10 seconds, settled into the crook of Declan's arm like a baby, looking smug. "We will get along fine," Declan said to the cat. Then he looked at Brenda, his eyes softening. "But it is not the one I want to feel safe with me." The air in the room shifted, the banter evaporating into that thick, heavy tension that seemed to follow Declan everywhere. Brenda swallowed hard, clutching her coffee cup like a shield. "I'm working on it, Wolf Boy. I'm working on it." Chapter 20. The First Night. The problem with the penthouse wasn't the lack of space, it was the abundance of it, and yet the singular focus of its owner. It was 11 p.m. The adrenaline had finally crashed, leaving Brenda exhausted in a way that felt bone deep. She had showered in a bathroom that was larger than her entire kitchen, washing away the smell of the gala, the fear of Stephen, and the general grime of the city. She emerged wearing her flannel pajamas, decorated with tiny penguins, and wrapped in a plush robe she had found. She walked into the bedroom. It was dominated by a bed that was surely a custom size. It was wider than a king. It was an emperor size, a werewolf alpha size. Declan was already there, sitting on the edge of the mattress. He was shirtless. Brenda stopped in the doorway. "Oh, I sleep hot," Declan said unapologetically. His skin was bronze in the dim light of the bedside lamp, the muscles of his back shifting as he turned to look at her. "Lichen metabolism runs at a higher temperature. If I wear a shirt, I sweat through it." "Right, metabolism. Science," Brenda muttered, trying very hard not to stare at the washboard abs that looked photoshopped. "So, sleeping arrangements. The couch is very nice. Italian leather. Expensive." "No," Declan said. It wasn't a question. "You are sleeping here." "Declan," Brenda started, tightening the belt of her robe, "we just met. I don't sleep with guys on the first date, even if they are superpowered wolf kings who saved my life. I have standards." "I am not asking for sex, Brenda," Declan said, his voice rough but gentle. "I am telling you that my wolf will not settle if you are in another room. I need to hear you breathe. I need to smell you. If you are behind a closed door, I will pace all night. I will scratch through the drywall. It will be expensive." He patted the vast expanse of mattress beside him. "The bed is 6 feet wide. You can have your side. I will stay on mine. I promise." Brenda looked at him. He looked genuinely pained at the thought of her being far away. The golden ring in his eyes was pulsing slowly. "Fine," she sighed, "but I'm building a pillow fort, a wall. If you breach the wall, you get the taser." "I saw the taser in your bag," Declan smiled faintly. "It's cute. It runs on 9 volts. "It stings," Brenda warned, climbing onto the bed. It was like sleeping on a cloud. She grabbed 3 pillows and constructed a barrier down the center of the mattress. "There, the Great Wall of Brenda. Do not cross." She crawled under the duvet on her side and turned off her lamp. Darkness fell, save for the glow of the city lights through the window. Brenda lay there, staring at the ceiling. She expected to be terrified. She was in bed with a monster, a predator. But as the minutes ticked by, she realized she wasn't scared. She could feel the heat radiating from him across the pillow barrier. It was like sleeping next to a radiator. And there was a sound, a low, rhythmic vibration coming from his side of the bed. It wasn't snoring. It was a purr, a deep, sub-vocal rumble that was barely audible, but felt incredibly soothing. "Are you purring?" Brenda whispered into the dark. The sound stopped abruptly. "No, lichens do not purr. It is a respiratory resonance." "You're purring," Brenda giggled, "like a giant, deadly kitten." "Go to sleep, Brenda," he grumbled. But a moment later, the sound started again, and to Brenda's surprise, it worked better than any white noise machine she had ever owned. Her eyelids grew heavy, the tension in her shoulders unspooled. For the first time in years, Brenda fell asleep without running through a mental checklist of tomorrow's disasters. She just slept. Chapter 21. The Morning After. Brenda woke up to the smell of burning, not the pleasant smell of a fireplace, but the acrid, unmistakable scent of carbonized bread. She opened her eyes. The space beside her was empty, though the sheets were still warm. Sunlight was streaming through the massive windows, blindingly bright off the snow-covered city below. She stretched, realized she hadn't been eaten in her sleep, and followed the smell of smoke to the kitchen. The scene that greeted her was one of domestic catastrophe. Declan was standing in front of the kitchen island. He was wearing the gray sweatpants again, but he looked like he had been to war. There was flour on the floor, there was an eggshell crushed into oblivion on the counter, and smoke was billowing from the toaster. "Damn it!" Declan snarled, slamming his hand down on the toaster's lever. The metal lever snapped off in his hand. He stared at the broken piece of plastic in his palm, looking defeated. "Good morning," Brenda said, leaning against the doorframe. "I see the appliances are staging a rebellion." Declan whipped around. He looked wild, hair messy, flour on his chest, eyes wide. "I tried to make toast. The dial is too sensitive. I turned it to 3 and it incinerated the bread. I tried to crack an egg and I applied too much force. It exploded." He gestured to the slimy mess on the counter. I can lead an army, he said, sounding genuinely distressed. I can run a Fortune 500 company. I can hunt elk in the dead of winter, but I cannot operate this infernal heating coil. Brenda laughed. She couldn't help it. The image of the terrifying Alpha King being defeated by a toaster was too much. She walked over to him, stepping over the flour spill. She gently took the broken lever from his hand and set it on the counter. You're trying too hard. You're tense. You're treating the egg like an enemy combatant. It is fragile. Everything here is fragile. You are fragile. He looked at her, his eyes searching her face. I am afraid I will break something, or someone. Brenda's smile softened. She reached out and placed her hand on his chest, right over his heart. It was beating slow and strong. I'm not an egg, Declan. I'm tougher than I look. And the toaster, well, the toaster was asking for it. She gently guided him away from the counter. Sit, she ordered, pointing to a bar stool. I will handle the crisis. You look pretty and don't touch anything. Declan sat, watching her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. Brenda moved efficiently. She cleaned the egg mess, she threw out the burnt toast, she found a skillet, butter, and fresh bread. Within 10 minutes, the smell of burning was replaced by the smell of French toast and sizzling bacon. She plated the food and slid it in front of him. Eat, she said. It's cooked. No raw meat for breakfast. Declan took a bite. He closed his eyes. This is... paused, searching for the word. Acceptable. It's delicious and you know it, Brenda said, hopping onto the stool next to him. It is, he admitted. He looked at her, flour still dusting his chest. I should hire a chef. I usually just eat protein bars or hunt. We're going to work on your domestic skills, Brenda said, stealing a piece of his bacon. Lesson 1, you don't need to use your alpha grip on the spatula. Declan watched her eat his bacon. A possessive, satisfied look settled over his face. He leaned in, bumping his shoulder against hers. I will learn, he promised, as long as you are the teacher. Deal, Brenda said. Now pass the syrup and tell me why my phone has 47 missed calls from my boss. Chapter 22. The Declaration of War. The domestic tranquility of French toast and bacon was shattered by a sound that was less like a doorbell and more like a gong being struck by a sledgehammer. Dong! The vibration rattled the espresso cups on the counter. Fluffy, who had been dozing on a velvet bar stool, hissed and puffed up to the size of a beach ball. Declan went rigid. The playful, flower-covered boyfriend vanished instantly, replaced by the apex predator. His spine straightened, his eyes flashed that warning shade of gold, and a low growl rumbled in his throat. Stay here, he commanded, his voice dropping an octave. It's probably just Amazon, Brenda said, though she grabbed a butter knife just in case. I ordered a scratching post. That is not Amazon, Declan said grimly. That is the bell of the pack courier. It is only used for matters of blood or territory. He marched to the elevator doors, which opened to reveal not a UPS driver in shorts, but a man in a dark, formal suit holding a scroll, a literal parchment scroll sealed with red wax. The man looked terrified. He held the scroll out with a trembling hand, keeping his eyes averted from Declan. Message from the Southern Alpha, the courier squeaked, for the Wolfram King. Declan snatched the scroll. Leave. The courier practically dove back into the elevator. Declan broke the wax seal, which Brenda noted was stamped with a wolf's paw, very on brand, and unrolled the parchment. His eyes scanned the text. The air in the penthouse temperature dropped rapidly as his rage built. The audacity, he roared. He slammed his hand down on the marble kitchen island. This time, the marble actually cracked. A spiderweb fracture spread from his fist. Okay, goodbye, security deposit, Brenda muttered, hopping off her stool. What does it say? Is it eviction notice? A noise complaint? It is a declaration of war, Declan snarled, tossing the scroll on the counter. Stephen has formally challenged my claim to the Northern Territory. He cites an ancestral grievance from the Treaty of 1974. He claims my grandfather annexed 30 acres of hunting ground illegally. So he wants land? Brenda asked, picking up the scroll. It was written in calligraphy. Nice handwriting, though. He wants blood, Declan corrected, pacing the room like a caged animal. This is a challenge of combat. We meet at the border at midnight. The packs fight. The alpha who remains standing takes the territory and the assets. He stopped pacing and looked at her, his expression fierce and terrifyingly possessive. He wants you, Brenda. He believes if he kills me and takes my territory, he takes my mate. Brenda felt a chill run down her spine that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. Excuse me? I am an asset? Like a foreclosure? In our law, yes, Declan admitted, looking ashamed but honest. If I fall, the victor claims the spoils. Well, that's incredibly sexist and outdated. And also, no, we are not having a werewolf rumble in the woods over real estate. But I have no choice, Declan said, his muscles coiling. I must answer the challenge. I will rip his head off. No ripping, Brenda shouted, slamming the butter knife down. Declan, listen to me. This is a business dispute. He's citing a treaty? A contract? Yes, but then it's not a war, Brenda declared, her eyes gleaming with the fire of a woman who loved a loophole. It's a lawsuit, and I'm about to become your lead counsel. Chapter 23. Stop the Violence. Declan looked at her as if she had suggested fighting a dragon with a feather duster. Brenda, he said slowly, you do not understand. Stephen is not filing a motion in small claims court. He is gathering 50 wolves at the tree line to tear my throat out. This is resolved with teeth, not paperwork. That is where you're wrong, Brenda argued, marching over to her purse and digging out her laptop. Violence is inefficient. It's messy. It causes bad PR. Do you know how hard it is to spin a massacre in the woods story for the local news? Oh, it was just a very aggressive pack of wild dogs? No, we are smarter than that. She slapped her laptop onto the cracked kitchen island and booted it up. You said he cited the Treaty of 1974, Brenda said, logging in. Do you have a copy of this treaty? It is in the archives, Declan said, confused, in the library of the manor, but it is ancient law. It's from 1974, Declan, not 1066. It was typed on a typewriter, not carved into stone tablets. I need you to get Mark to scan it and email it to me, immediately. Brenda, I must prepare for battle. I need to rally the pack. I need to sharpen my claws. You will do no such thing, Brenda ordered. She walked up to him and poked him in his rock-hard chest. Look at me. I manage crises for a living. I stopped a tech CEO from tweeting a racial slur during Black History Month. I saved a senator's career after he was caught pantless in a fountain. I can handle a dispute over property lines. Declan looked down at her finger poking his chest. He looked into her eyes. The wolf in him, the primal beast that wanted to destroy, paused. It recognized a different kind of power. It wasn't physical strength. It was absolute, unshakable confidence. You really think you can stop a war with a PDF? He asked skeptically. I think Stephen is a thug in a cheap suit who probably hasn't read the fine print, Brenda said, grinning. And I think you, my big, scary alpha, are going to let me handle this because you promised to learn domestic skills. This is domestic. It's protecting our home. Declan let out a long, ragged breath. The gold in his eyes receded slightly. Mark, he barked at the air. He pulled out his phone. Go to the manor. Scan the Treaty of 1974. Send it to Brenda. Now. He hung up and looked at her. If this fails, if he crosses the line, I kill him. If this fails, Brenda agreed, you can eat him, but give me 6 hours. You have 4, Declan said. The challenge expires at sunset. 4 hours, Brenda nodded, cracking her knuckles. Plenty of time to destroy a man's life with forensic accounting. She turned back to her laptop. I need coffee, I need a whiteboard, and I need to call Jane. Chapter 24. The War Room. 30 minutes later, the sleek, minimalist penthouse had been transformed into a command center that would have made the Pentagon proud. Brenda had dragged a whiteboard from Declan's home office into the living room. It was covered in red marker diagrams, arrows, and aggressive question marks. Fluffy watched from the back of the sofa, occasionally batting at the marker cap Brenda had dropped. On the phone, on speaker, was Jane. Okay, let me get this straight. Jane's voice crackled through the room, sounding completely unfazed. Your date went well, but he's a werewolf king. His rival, Steven, who dresses like a Miami drug lord, is threatening a turf war based on a 50-year-old land contract, and you need me to cross-reference property inflation rates in the tri-state area from 1970 to present. Exactly, Brenda said, pacing the room in her penguin pajamas. And Jane, I need dirt on Steven's holding company, Southern Claw LLC. I bet he's laundering money or evading taxes. Bad guys always evade taxes. On it, Jane said. By the way, Gerald called again. He's threatening to fire you if you don't show up for the client meeting at 2 o'clock. Tell Gerald I'm busy preventing a supernatural bloodbath. Brenda waved a hand. Or tell him I have cholera, whichever he believes more. Cholera it is, Jane said, sending the inflation data now. Mark, who had returned from the manor at breakneck speed, was currently cowering in the kitchen, tasked with operating the espresso machine. He was terrified of Brenda. He had seen her yell at the Alpha, and the Alpha had listened. In Mark's mind, this made Brenda the most dangerous creature on the planet. Brenda, Mark barked. Mark jumped, nearly dropping a saucer. Yes, Luna? Miss Brenda? More caffeine, and see if there's a printer in this house. I need hard copies. Yes, ma'am, Mark scrambled. Declan stood by the window, watching the flurry of activity with a mixture of confusion and awe. He was used to war rooms involving maps, knives, and growling lieutenants. He had never seen a war room involving a woman in flannel pajamas weaponizing a spreadsheet. He walked over to the whiteboard, where Brenda had written, "The math doesn't lie," in all caps. You found something? He asked. I'm close, Brenda muttered, squinting at the scanned document on her screen. Look at this clause, paragraph 4, section B. The territory lines shall be adjusted annually based on the migration of the elk herds and the flow of the Silver Creek. Yes, Declan nodded. The creek has not moved. No, Brenda grinned, tapping the screen, but the elk have. And more importantly, the creek was dammed by the Army Corps of Engineers in 1985. The water flow shifted 2 miles east. She looked up at him, her eyes shining with the thrill of the hunt. If the treaty is based on the current flow of the creek, Steven isn't just wrong about you owing him land. He's been squatting on your territory for 40 years. Declan stared at the map. He traced the line of the creek. His eyes widened. He owes me, Declan realized. He owes you, and based on the penalty clauses for trespassing, he owes you about $40 million in back rent. She slammed the laptop shut. Pack your bags, wolf boy. We're going to a meeting. I should bring my sword, Declan suggested, looking at the fireplace mantel. Bring a calculator. It cuts deeper. Chapter 25. The Math Discrepancy. You cannot wear a pencil skirt to a battlefield, Declan argued, watching Brenda blindly rummage through her overnight bag. The snow is 2 feet deep. There will be mud. There will be blood. There will be no blood, Brenda corrected, pulling out a sharp, charcoal gray blazer. And I'm not dressing for a battlefield, Declan. I'm dressing for a boardroom hostile takeover. In corporate warfare, shoulder pads are the equivalent of chainmail. It was 4 p.m. The winter sun was already dipping below the skyline of the city, casting long, purple shadows across the penthouse. The war room was being dismantled. The whiteboard had been photographed, the spreadsheets printed in triplicate, and the Treaty of 1974 was safely tucked into a leather portfolio. Brenda stood in front of the full-length mirror, smoothing down her lapels. She looked exhausted. Her eyes were rimmed with red, and she was running entirely on espresso and spite. But she also looked dangerous. It was the specific kind of danger that made interns weep and CEOs sweat. Do I have lipstick? I need red of power, or maybe litigation crimson. Declan walked up behind her. He was dressed for war in a more traditional sense, heavy combat boots, dark tactical pants, and a thick thermal shirt that clung to his muscles. He had strapped a long, jagged knife to his thigh, and the energy radiating off him was enough to make the hair on Brenda's arms stand up. You are terrifying, he murmured, looking at her reflection. But you are human. If Steven decides to ignore the paperwork, if he shifts, then you protect me, Brenda said simply, meeting his golden gaze in the glass. That's the deal, right? I handle the logic. You handle the violence. We're a power couple, like Beyoncé and Jay-Z, but with more fur. Declan rested his chin on the top of her head, inhaling her scent. I will not let him touch you. If he comes within 10 feet, I will end him. Good, Brenda said, patting his cheek. Now, grab the cat. The cat? Declan pulled back. We are bringing Fluffy to a territorial dispute? We can't leave him here alone. He'll scratch the furniture out of spite. Besides, he's an emotional support animal. Maybe seeing a cat will calm Stephen down. Everyone loves cats. Stephen eats cats, Declan said grimly. Well, he won't eat this one, Brenda declared. Fluffy is part of the team now. Mark, is the car ready? Mark, who had been nervously pacing by the elevator, snapped to attention. Yes, Miss Brenda. The car is fueled. I put snow tires on. Excellent. Brenda grabbed her briefcase. Let's go teach a wolf how to do math. They rode the elevator down in silence. When they reached the garage, Brenda paused before getting into the Aston Martin. She looked at Declan, who was vibrating with lethal intent. Hey, she said softly, trust the plan. Trust the math. Numbers don't lie. People lie, wolves lie, but compound interest, that is the universal truth. Declan looked at her, his eyes softening just a fraction. I trust you, Brenda, with my life and my territory. Good, she grinned. Now let's go bankrupt a villain. Chapter 26. The Meeting. The meeting point was not a conference room. It was a clearing in the Blackwood Forest, a stretch of ancient, snow-covered wilderness that marked the border between the northern and southern territories. The Aston Martin crunched through the frozen ruts of an old logging road, the headlights cutting through the swirling snow. There, Declan growled, pointing through the windshield. In the middle of the clearing, illuminated by the headlights of 3 massive SUVs, stood Stephen. He wasn't alone. Behind him stood at least 40 men and women. They weren't wearing suits this time. They were dressed in rugged winter gear, and many of them were already partially shifted, eyes glowing yellow, teeth bared, growls audible even over the sound of the car engine. It was a classic standoff. Tension hung in the freezing air like a guillotine blade waiting to drop. Stay in the car, Mark whimpered, clutching the steering wheel. Unlock the doors, Mark, Brenda ordered, checking her lipstick in the vanity mirror. Declan, Stephen started. We stick to the plan. You go out there, you look big and scary. You let him monologue. Then, when he demands the land, you introduce his legal counsel. Declan took a deep breath. He squeezed her hand, hard enough to bruise had he not been so careful, and then opened his door. He stepped out into the snow. A roar went up from the opposing pack. 40 wolves snarled in unison. It was a terrifying sound, primal and deep. Declan didn't flinch. He walked to the center of the clearing, his boots crunching loudly. He stopped 10 yards from Stephen. Stephen, Declan shouted, his voice booming without effort. You called this meeting. You challenged my claim. Stephen stepped forward. He was wearing a fur coat that looked like it had been skinned from a bear. He looked manic, his eyes wild with the anticipation of violence. I challenge your right to exist on this land, Stephen yelled, playing to his audience. The Treaty of 1974 grants the Southern Pack all land south of the Silver Creek. You have been hunting on my soil. You have been stealing from my pack. The wolves behind him howled in agreement. They were hungry for a fight. They wanted blood. We demand restitution, Stephen screamed. We demand the northern woods, and we demand the surrender of your mate. Declan's hands curled into fists. His claws punched through his gloves. This was the moment he was supposed to shift. This was the moment the war began. Instead, Declan stepped aside. I dispute your claim, and I have brought my auditor to explain why. Stephen blinked. Your what? The passenger door of the Aston Martin opened. Brenda stepped out. She wasn't wearing furs. She wasn't holding a weapon. She was wearing a charcoal blazer, black trousers, and boots with a sensible heel. She held a leather briefcase in one hand and a portable battery-operated projector in the other. She walked across the snow, the wind whipping her hair, and stopped right next to Declan. Hi, Stephen, Brenda said, her voice bright and cheery. Love the coat. Very Game of Thrones Season 1. A bit dated, but bold. Stephen stared at her. His pack stared at her. You brought the human? Stephen laughed, a cruel barking sound. To a death match? Oh, this isn't a death match, Steve, Brenda said, setting up her projector on the hood of Declan's car. This is a performance review. Chapter 27. Death by Spreadsheet. Turn it on, Mark, Brenda yelled over her shoulder. Mark, shaking inside the car, hit a switch. The portable projector beam hit the side of a white van Stephen had parked nearby. A massive, glowing Excel spreadsheet appeared on the vehicle's metal flank. The wolves gasped. They had expected claws. They got columns and rows. What is this? Stephen snarled, stepping forward. Is this a joke? This, Brenda said, pulling a laser pointer out of her pocket, is a forensic analysis of the Treaty of 1974, cross-referenced with the Army Corps of Engineers' hydrological data from 1985. She clicked the pointer. A red dot danced on the projection. You claimed that the border is this Silver Creek, Brenda shouted, addressing the confused pack behind Stephen. And you are correct. Paragraph 4, Section B, clearly states the creek is the boundary. Exactly, Stephen yelled, and you are north of the creek. We are north of where the creek is, Brenda corrected, but are we north of where the creek was? She clicked the remote. The slide changed. It was a map of the region from 1974 overlaid with a map from today. In 1985, Brenda lectured, pacing back and forth in the snow like she was giving a TED Talk, the government built a dam 6 miles upstream. This diverted the natural flow of the Silver Creek exactly 2.4 miles to the east. She pointed the laser at the gap between the two blue lines on the map. This means, Brenda continued, her voice rising, that for the last 40 years, the Southern Territory has technically been squatting on 2.4 miles of northern land. You haven't been losing territory, Stephen. You've been occupying Declan's land illegally since the Reagan administration. A murmur went through Stephen's pack. Wolves looked at each other. They knew the creek had moved, but they had never thought about the paperwork. Stephen was sweaty now. This is a trick. Lawyer lies. Math doesn't lie, Stephen, Brenda said coldly. She clicked the remote again. A new slide appeared. It was a massive number, written in red with a lot of zeros. Total owed, $42,500,000. I calculated the back rent, based on the acreage, the timber value, and the inflation rate of the US dollar, plus I added a standard 5% compound interest fee for late payment. She turned to Stephen, who looked like he was about to vomit. You don't get to take Declan's land, Brenda said, her voice echoing in the silent clearing. You actually owe him $42 million, and based on your company's public tax filings, which are public record, by the way, your pack is currently insolvent. She turned to Stephen's wolves. He's broke, guys, Brenda announced to the army of shifters. He can't pay you. He can't feed you. He started this war to steal Declan's resources because he ran his own pack into the ground. The silence that followed was deafening. Stephen looked at his pack. They weren't growling at Declan anymore. They were looking at Stephen with narrowed eyes. She's lying, Stephen shrieked, his voice cracking. She's a human witch. Kill her. Kill them both. He shifted. It was a violent, ugly transformation. He tore out of his bear coat, exploding into a massive gray wolf. He launched himself at Brenda, jaws snapping. Declan didn't even need to shift fully. He moved with the speed of a lightning strike. He stepped in front of Brenda, caught the mid-air wolf by the throat with one hand, and slammed him into the frozen ground. Crack. The impact shook the snow off the trees. Declan held the thrashing alpha down, his eyes blazing gold. He leaned down, his voice a guttural roar. She did the math. He looked up at Stephen's pack. Your alpha is defeated by logic and by strength. Who claims him? Nobody moved. Then a large, scarred wolf from the back of the pack stepped forward. He looked at the spreadsheet projected on the van. He looked at Stephen pinned in the dirt. He looked at Brenda, holding her laser pointer like a sword. The wolf bowed his head to Brenda. Then, one by one, the other 40 wolves bowed. They weren't bowing to Declan. They were bowing to the woman who had just conquered an army with Microsoft Excel. Brenda clicked off the laser pointer. Meeting adjourned. Chapter 28. The Submission. The silence in the clearing was absolute, broken only by the whimpering of Stephen, who was still pinned beneath Declan's boot, and the humming of the projector fan on the hood of the Aston Martin. Brenda stood next to the car, her laser pointer still glowing red against the side of the white van. She surveyed the 40 members of the Southern Pack who had just bowed to her. It was a surreal moment. 10 minutes ago, she was worried about being eaten. Now, she felt like she was chairing the most aggressive board meeting of her life. "Okay," Brenda said, her voice cutting through the cold night air. "You can stand up now. My knees hurt just looking at you." The large, scarred wolf who had initiated the bow straightened up first. He was massive, with gray fur that looked like steel wool. He shimmered, his bones cracking and shifting until a man stood in his place. He was rugged, bearded, and wore a torn flannel shirt. "I am Silas," the man rumbled, his voice thick with respect. "Second in command of the Southern Pack." "Nice to meet you, Silas," Brenda said professionally, tucking her laser pointer into her pocket. "I assume since you bowed, you are accepting the terms of the audit." Silas looked at Stephen, who was currently drooling into the snow, defeated not by strength alone, but by the crushing weight of financial insolvency. "Stephen lied to us," Silas spat, looking at his former alpha with disgust. "He told us we were fighting for our birthright. He told us the Northern Pack was weak. He did not tell us he had gambled away our pension fund and that we were trespassing on federal land." Silas turned back to Brenda. "We follow strength, but we also follow wisdom. You defeated him without shedding a drop of our blood. That is rare." Declan stepped off Stephen, though he kept a heavy hand on the man's shoulder to keep him down. "Stephen is stripped of his rank," Declan announced, his voice booming. "He will be exiled. He can go live in Florida. I hear it is nice there for retirees with bad credit." Brenda stepped forward, opening her briefcase. "Now, regarding the $42 million owed," the Southern Wolves flinched. They didn't have $42, let alone millions. "I propose a settlement. Since you cannot pay in cash, you will pay in labor and loyalty. The Southern Pack will be absorbed into the Northern Pack. You will patrol the borders. You will work in the Wolfram distribution centers, with full benefits and dental, by the way, because Declan isn't a monster. In exchange, the debt is forgiven." Silas's eyes widened. "Dental? And vision," Brenda added. "I noticed a lot of you squinting at the spreadsheet. We need to get that checked out." Silas looked at his pack. They were nodding enthusiastically. They had been starving under Stephen's rule. The promise of a steady job and teeth cleaning was better than any territory war. "We accept," Silas said, dropping to one knee again. "We pledge our loyalty to the Northern Alpha and to the Luna of the Ledger." "Luna of the Ledger," Brenda mused. "I kind of like it. It has a ring to it." Declan walked over to her. The golden glow in his eyes was so intense it was almost blinding. He looked at her with a mixture of raw hunger and absolute adoration. "You," he growled low in his throat, "are the most magnificent creature I have ever seen." "I know," Brenda smirked, closing her briefcase. "Now, can we go? My feet are freezing, and I think Fluffy is eating the leather seats in your car." Declan scooped her up into his arms, ignoring her protest. "Mark," he barked, "drive us home. The war is over." Chapter 29. Gerald Calls. The adrenaline crash was hitting Brenda hard by the time the Aston Martin hit the city limits. She was slumped in the passenger seat, watching the city lights blur past, while Declan sat in the back, having given up the front seat to give her legroom, looking like a king returning from a crusade. Then her phone rang. It wasn't the polite chime of a text, it was the screeching, panic-inducing ringtone she had assigned specifically to one person, Gerald, her boss. Brenda groaned, fishing the phone out of her purse. I literally can't deal with him right now. I just annexed a werewolf army. I don't have the bandwidth to discuss font choices." "Answer it," Declan said from the back seat. His voice was calm, but there was an edge to it. Brenda sighed and swiped the screen. "Hello, Gerald." "Gerald!" Gerald's voice was so loud she had to hold the phone away from her ear. "Where are you? You missed the 2 p.m. briefing with the client. You missed the 4 p.m. strategy call. Do you know what kind of disaster this is? I have the vice president of marketing breathing down my neck." "I'm sorry, Gerald. I had a family emergency, a really big one involving a lot of legal paperwork." I don't care if your grandmother exploded, Gerald shrieked. You are paid to be available 24/7. You are my fixer, and if you are not fixing things, you are useless to me. You need to get your priorities straight, Brenda. If you aren't in this office by 8 a.m. tomorrow, don't bother coming in at all. Do you hear me? I will ruin your reputation in this city. You'll never work in PR again. Brenda opened her mouth to argue, to apologize, to make up an excuse about cholera. But a large hand reached over the center console and gently took the phone from her grip. Gerald, Declan said into the receiver. His voice was low, smooth, and terrified Mark so much the car swerved slightly. Who is this? Gerald sputtered. Put Brenda back on. This is a private line. This is Declan Wolfram, CEO of Wolfram Holdings. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Everyone in the city knew who Declan Wolfram was. He owned half the skyline. Mr. Wolfram? Gerald's voice dropped an octave, suddenly dripping with sycophancy. I didn't realize Brenda was with a client. I apologize for the interruption. Brenda is one of our best. She is not with a client, Declan interrupted coldly. She is with her partner. Oh, well, that's... Personal time is important, of course, but she has contractual obligations. Gerald, Declan said, what is the current market valuation of your agency? Garrison PR, correct? Excuse me? The valuation, Declan repeated, sounding bored. Is it 10 million? 12? We were valued at 15 million last quarter, but I don't see how that's relevant. I am buying it, Declan instructed. I am instructing my legal team to wire $20 million to your primary shareholders within the hour. Effective immediately, Wolfram Holdings owns Garrison PR. You're buying the company? Gerald choked. Yes, and as the new owner, I am making my first executive decision. Declan looked at Brenda, winking. You're fired, Gerald. You can't. I just did. Security will escort you out of the building in the morning. Do not take the stapler. That belongs to me now. Declan hung up the phone and tossed it back into Brenda's lap. Brenda stared at him. Her mouth was opening and closing like a fish. Did you just spend $20 million to fire my boss? It seemed efficient, Declan shrugged, leaning back in his seat. He was raising his voice at you. I did not like his tone. Besides, I need an in-house PR firm. The PAC's public image could use some polishing. Brenda looked at the phone, then at Declan, and started to laugh. It was a hysterical, exhausted laugh that bubbled up from her chest. You are insane, she said, wiping a tear from her eye. Utterly insane. Perhaps, Declan smiled, but you don't have to go to work tomorrow. Chapter 30. The Snowstorm. By the time they reached the penthouse, the weather had turned from a gentle snowfall into a full-blown atmospheric event. The wind howled around the glass skyscrapers of the city, driving the snow horizontally. The city below had disappeared, swallowed by a white void. Storm of the century, Mark muttered as he parked the car in the underground garage. They're shutting down the bridges. No one is getting in or out of the city tonight. Perfect, Declan murmured. They took the elevator up. When the doors opened into the penthouse, the silence was a physical relief. It was warm. It smelled of cedar and the faint, lingering scent of the French toast Brenda had made that morning. Brenda dropped her briefcase by the door and kicked off her boots. Her feet ached. Her brain ached, but her heart felt strangely light. We're trapped, Brenda noted, walking over to the floor-to-ceiling windows. All she could see was swirling white. It felt like they were inside a snow globe that someone had shaken too hard. The roads are closed, Declan confirmed, coming to stand behind her. He placed his hands on her shoulders, his thumbs rubbing the tension knots in her neck. Mark has gone home to his family. It is just us. And Fluffy, Brenda added. Meow, Fluffy agreed, trotting out from the bedroom. He looked at Declan, purred, and immediately flopped onto his back, demanding belly rubs. And Fluffy, Declan amended, smiling. Brenda leaned back against Declan's chest. He was solid, warm, and real. The events of the last 24 hours swirled in her mind. The parking spot, the slap, the gala, the wolf fight, the spreadsheet victory. It was madness. But standing here, watching the storm rage outside while she was safe inside his arms, Brenda realized something terrifying. She wasn't looking for an exit strategy anymore. "So," Brenda said softly, watching the snow batter the glass, "I'm unemployed, I'm dating a werewolf, and I'm trapped in a blizzard with a cat who loves you more than me. Technically," Declan murmured, kissing the top of her head, "you are not unemployed. You are the CEO of the PR firm I just bought. You can hire yourself back, with a raise." Brenda turned in his arms to face him. His eyes were blue again, deep and endless as the ocean. The gold was gone, but the intensity remained. "A raise, huh?" she teased, looping her arms around his neck. "I have very high demands. I require dental, vision, and unlimited coffee." "Done," Declan whispered, his hands sliding down her waist, pulling her flush against him. "Anything else?" "One more thing," Brenda whispered, her heart starting to hammer against her ribs. "Name it." "Shut up and kiss me," she said. "We have a lot of snow to wait out." Declan didn't need to be told twice. He lowered his head, and for the first time since the parking garage, he kissed her. It wasn't a stolen peck or a misunderstanding. It was a claim. It was slow, deep, and tasted like absolution. Outside, the wind screamed, burying the world in ice. Inside, the fire roared to life, and the real story was just beginning. Chapter 31. The Walls Come Down. The blizzard raged outside, a wall of white noise that turned the penthouse into a suspended capsule of silence and warmth. The city was gone. The office was gone. The chaos of the last 24 hours was buried under 6 inches of snow. Inside, the only light came from the massive fireplace and the soft glow of the Christmas tree Declan had apparently ordered Mark to set up while they were at the gala. Brenda sat on the plush rug in front of the fire, a glass of extremely expensive red wine in her hand. She had changed out of her corporate warlord suit back into her penguin pajamas, a transition that felt like shedding a heavy armor. Declan sat behind her on the sofa, his long legs stretched out, watching the flames. He was shirtless again because, apparently, the man was a walking furnace who was allergic to cotton blends. "So," Brenda said, swirling her wine, "we are officially snowed in. The internet is spotty, the cable is out. We have to do the one thing humans fear most." "Hunt for survival?" Declan asked, reaching for a bowl of pretzels. "No. Talk." Brenda turned to look at him. "Real talk, not crisis management talk, not wolf treaty talk. Just us." Declan stopped chewing a pretzel. He looked guarded for a split second, his blue eyes shifting toward the fire. "I am not good at talking. I am better at doing, fixing, protecting." "I know," Brenda said softly. "I saw you throw a man through a wall today. It was very communicative. But I need to know who I'm trapped with, Declan. Who are you when you aren't the Alpha King?" Declan sighed, a sound that rumbled deep in his chest. He slid off the sofa to sit next to her on the rug. Fluffy, who had been dozing near the heat, immediately rolled over and placed a paw on Declan's knee, claiming him. "I have been the alpha since I was 22, Declan admitted, scratching the trader's cat. "My father passed unexpectedly. I inherited the company, the pack, the territory, everything. I had to become hard. I had to become frightening. If an alpha shows weakness, the pack suffers. Rivals like Steven appear." He looked at his hands, the same hands that could crush stone, but were currently petting a Persian cat with infinite gentleness. "I am lonely, Brenda," he said, the admission tearing out of him. "I am surrounded by people who fear me, or people who want something from me. My grandmother loves me, but she expects me to be a king. Mark respects me, but he is terrified of me." He turned his gaze to her. "You are the first person in a decade who looked at me and didn't see a paycheck or a predator. You saw a jerk who stole a parking spot." Brenda laughed, though her throat felt tight. "To be fair, it was a really good spot. And then you slapped me." Declan smiled, a genuine soft expression that transformed his face. "And when I roared at you, you didn't run. You demanded a PowerPoint." "I like data," Brenda defended. "Data makes sense. Emotions are messy." "We are messy," Declan said, reaching out to tuck a loose strand of hair behind her ear, his skin burning hot against hers. Brenda leaned into his touch. She felt the walls she had built around herself, the sarcasm, the workaholism, the defensive wit starting to crumble. She had spent so long being the fixer for everyone else, holding up the sky for incompetent men like Gerald. I'm tired of being strong, Declan. I'm tired of being the only adult in the room. Then don't be. Be soft. Be mine. Let me carry the weight for a while. Brenda looked into his eyes and saw no deception, just raw, terrifying honesty. Okay, she whispered, but if you drop me, I'm suing. I will never drop you, he promised. Chapter 32. The Surrender. The kiss that followed wasn't like the first one by the window. That had been a promise. This was the fulfillment. Declan kissed her with a hunger that had been building since the moment she slammed her hand against his car window. It was consuming. His mouth was hot, demanding, and tasting of wine and something purely him, a taste like ozone and pine that made Brenda's head spin. She tangled her fingers in his hair, pulling him closer, erasing the distance between them. The mating bond, which had been a low hum in the background of her mind, suddenly cranked up the volume to a deafening roar. It wasn't just physical, it was sensory overload. As their skin connected, Brenda felt a sudden rush of emotions that weren't her own. She felt a fierce, overwhelming protectiveness. She felt a deep-seated relief, like a traveler finally putting down a heavy pack. And she felt desire, sharp, jagged, and absolute. Is this him? She wondered dizzily. Am I feeling him? Declan groaned, a guttural sound that vibrated against her lips. His hands roamed over her back, tracing the line of her spine through the flannel pajamas. Every place he touched left a trail of fire. You are so loud, he rasped, breaking the kiss to bury his face in her neck. He inhaled deeply, his nose brushing against her pulse point. Your heart, it's beating like a hummingbird, and your scent, it's driving me insane. Good, Brenda gasped, arching her back as his lips grazed her collarbone. Go insane. Being sane is overrated. Brenda, he warned, his voice straining with control. My wolf is close to the surface. I do not want to scare you. You couldn't scare me if you tried, she challenged, gripping his shoulders. I saw you eat a raw steak. I saw you throw a guy named Steven. I'm still here. Show me. Declan looked up at her. His eyes were fully gold now, glowing in the firelight. The pupils were blown wide. He didn't look human. He looked like a creature of myth who had found his treasure. Mine, he growled. He flipped them over, pressing her into the plush rug. He wasn't heavy. He held his weight on his forearms, but he was all-encompassing. He caged her in. Yours, she agreed breathlessly. The rest of the world dissolved. The blizzard outside ceased to exist. The only thing that mattered was the heat of his skin, the rough rasp of his stubble against her neck, and the way he worshipped her body like it was a sacred temple. When he finally claimed her, it wasn't with the violence of the wolf, but with the desperate, reverent passion of a man who had been starving for a lifetime. At the peak of it, as the pleasure crashed over her like a tidal wave, Brenda felt a sharp, sudden pinch on the curve of her shoulder. A bite, not enough to break the skin, but enough to mark, enough to seal. A shock wave of energy blasted through her. It felt like a golden thread snapping into place, tying her soul to his with a knot that could never be undone. She cried out, not in pain, but in shock. Declan collapsed against her, burying his face in her hair, his breathing ragged. I have you, he whispered into her ear, his voice thick with emotion. You're safe. I've got you. And for the first time in her life, Brenda didn't need to check her phone or her schedule or her email. She just closed her eyes and held on to her wolf. Chapter 33. The Bond Cemented. Christmas morning arrived not with a bang, but with a blinding white light. Brenda woke up slowly. She was in the massive, emperor-sized bed, buried under a mountain of down comforters. She felt incredibly warm, incredibly rested, and different. It was hard to explain. It felt like there was a new radio station playing in the back of her head. It was playing a song called Contentment. She stretched, her limbs heavy and relaxed. She reached out for Declan, but his side of the bed was empty. Panic flared for a split second. Did he leave? Was it a dream? But before the thought could fully form, a voice echoed in her mind. I am in the kitchen. Do not panic. Brenda sat bolt upright, clutching the sheet to her chest. Okay, telepathy. That's new. That wasn't in the brochure. Coffee is ready. The voice, Declan's voice, echoed again. It sounded amused. Brenda scrambled out of bed, grabbed a robe, and padded out to the living room. The storm had passed. The sun was shining brilliantly off the snow-covered city, turning the world into a sparkling diamond. Declan was standing by the Christmas tree, wearing pajama bottoms and a hideous red sweater that looked suspiciously hand-knitted. He was holding 2 mugs of coffee. Good morning, Luna, he smiled, handing her a mug. Get out of my head, Brenda said, though she was smiling too. She took the coffee and took a sip. Perfect. Since when can we do the mind-talky thing? Since last night, Declan said, his eyes darkening slightly as he remembered. The bond is cemented. I can feel your emotions. You can hear my thoughts if I project them loud enough. Great, Brenda muttered. Now I can never secretly judge your outfit choices. I heard that, Declan grinned, and this sweater was a gift from my grandmother. It is bulletproof Kevlar yarn. Of course it is. They sat under the tree. Fluffy was already there, batting at a wrapping paper bow. Gifts, Declan announced. He reached under the tree and pulled out a sleek black box. For you. Brenda opened it. Inside sat a velvet pouch. She opened the pouch and poured the contents into her hand. It was a necklace, but not just any necklace. It was a platinum chain holding a pendant shaped like a tiny, intricate steering wheel. In the center of the wheel was a massive, flawless diamond. It is a reminder, Declan said softly, that you should let me drive, but also that you steer me. Brenda felt tears prick her eyes. It was ridiculous. It was extravagant. It was perfect. I love it, she sniffled. You rich, sentimental gargoyle. Your turn, she said, reaching behind the tree. She pulled out a small, poorly wrapped package. I bought this at a gas station on the way to the gala when we stopped for fuel. It was an impulse buy. Declan took the package. He tore open the paper with his large hands. He stared at the object. It was a silver whistle, a dog whistle. Read the engraving, Brenda prompted. Declan squinted at the tiny letters etched into the metal. For when you're being a bad boy. Declan burst out laughing. It was a loud, joyous sound that filled the penthouse. He laughed until he had to wipe his eyes. You are going to train me? He asked, hooking the whistle onto the chain around his neck. Absolutely, Brenda said, crossing her arms. Sit. Declan immediately sat on the floor. Good boy, Brenda grinned. Declan grabbed her ankle and pulled her down onto the rug with him, burying her in a hug that smelled of pine and happiness. Merry Christmas, Brenda, he whispered. Merry Christmas, Declan, she replied, resting her head on his Kevlar-covered chest. Now, let's go see what Fluffy did to your stocking. Chapter 34. The Matriarch's Summons. The bubble of isolation that had surrounded the penthouse finally popped around noon on Christmas Day. The sun, bright and unforgiving, melted the frost on the windows, and the city below began to wake up. Snowplows scraped against the asphalt 40 stories down, a harsh reminder that reality was waiting. Brenda was in the middle of teaching Declan how to use the espresso machine without crushing the portafilter when the private elevator chimed. Mark stepped out. He looked rested, though he immediately averted his eyes when he saw Declan in his grandmother's hand-knitted red sweater. Merry Christmas, Alpha, Miss Brenda, Mark said, bowing his head. The roads to the manor have been cleared. Grandmother Kate requests your presence for high tea. She was insistent. Insistent how? Brenda asked, sipping her third coffee. Like, I missed you insistent, or I will send a hit squad insistent. She mentioned something about reviewing the merger, Mark replied, nervously. Declan sighed, the sound rumbling in his chest. She means the acquisition of your PR firm and the annexation of the Southern Pack. She does not like being left out of business decisions. Great, Brenda muttered. I have to face the godfather of werewolves before I've even had lunch. She respects you, Declan assured her, walking over to wrap his arms around her waist from behind. He rested his chin on her shoulder. You saved her territory without spilling blood. To Kate, that is the ultimate victory. Efficiency is her love language. Efficiency is my love language, Brenda corrected. Kate's love language is intimidation. We should go, Declan said, kissing her cheek. If we are late, she will critique my posture for an hour. Getting ready was a different experience now. There was no hiding. As Brenda brushed her teeth, she could feel Declan's amusement radiating through the bond from the bedroom where he was getting dressed. When she couldn't find her other sock, Declan appeared in the doorway holding it before she even asked. This telepathy thing is going to get annoying, Brenda warned, snatching the sock. Only if you have secrets, Declan's voice echoed in her head, smooth and teasing. Get out of my brain, wolf boy, she thought back. They packed Fluffy into his carrier, a process that required bribery with premium salmon treats, and headed down to the car. The drive to the countryside was breathtaking. The world was blanketed in pristine white snow, the trees bowing under the weight of the ice. But the tension in the car was palpable. Not between Brenda and Declan, their hands were clasped firmly over the center console, but from the destination looming ahead. Wolfram Manor looked even more imposing in the daylight. It was a fortress of gray stone against the white snow, ancient and unyielding. Ready? Declan asked as Mark pulled the Aston Martin up to the massive front doors. Brenda took a deep breath. She touched the diamond steering wheel pendant at her throat for courage. I've faced down 40 wolves with a spreadsheet. I can handle one old lady with a cane. She is not just an old lady, Declan whispered as he opened her door. She is the one who taught me how to bite. Chapter 35. The Queen's Approval. The drawing room of Wolfram Manor was warmer than Brenda expected. A massive fire crackled in the hearth, and the air smelled of lavender and old paper. Grandmother Kate sat in a high-backed velvet wing chair that looked like a throne. She was wearing a dark green dress with a high lace collar, and the sapphire brooch Brenda had admired at the gala was pinned prominently to her chest. "You're late," Kate said without looking up from the porcelain teacup she was holding. 3 minutes late. I assume the roads were icy or Declan was driving. "I was driving, Grandmother," Declan lied smoothly, guiding Brenda into the room. "Liar," Kate snapped, her blue eyes snapping up to meet his. "Mark drove. I can smell his fear on your coats. Sit down." They sat on the sofa opposite her. Brenda tried to look professional, but it was hard when she was sitting next to a man who was emitting waves of protective alpha energy that felt like a space heater. Kate set her teacup down with a sharp clink. She turned her gaze to Brenda. It was a laser-focused inspection, dissecting Brenda's soul layer by layer. "So," Kate said finally, "the consultant." "The consultant," Brenda agreed, holding her gaze. "You audited a war. Silas called me this morning. He said you humiliated Stevens so thoroughly with a PowerPoint presentation that Stevens' own pack exiled him before Declan could even land a killing blow. Violence is bad for the bottom line, and Stevens' financials were a disaster. It was a mercy killing, really, just fiscal instead of physical." Kate stared at her. The silence stretched for 10 agonizing seconds. Brenda didn't fidget, she didn't look away, she channeled her inner Gerald handling energy. Slowly, incredibly, a smile spread across Kate's face. It wasn't the scary smirk from the party, it was a genuine, terrifyingly sharp grin. "I like her," Kate announced, slapping her knee. "Declan, keep her. She's vicious." "I intend to," Declan said, squeezing Brenda's hand. "Good. Now," she leaned forward, her eyes gleaming, "tell me about this acquisition of Garrison PR. Is it true you fired the manager over the phone?" Gerald was ineffective and loud. "Ineffective leadership must be cold," Kate nodded approvingly. "We will need to restructure the firm, of course. We can use it to clean up some of the messier aspects of pack life. NDAs, property damage control, explanations for why half the staff disappears on the full moon. I've already drafted a preliminary strategy. I call it Operation Fur and Finance. I think we can rebrand the pack's corporate image as eco-friendly and nature-focused." Kate threw her head back and laughed, a dry, raspy sound that sounded like autumn leaves crunching. Eco-friendly, Kate chuckled. Oh, the irony. You are a dangerous woman, Brenda. Welcome to the family. She reached into the pocket of her dress and pulled out a small, heavy iron key. She tossed it to Brenda. What's this? Brenda asked, catching it. The key to the archives, Kate said solemnly. The real archives, not the library, the basement. If you are going to be managing our crises, you need to know where the bodies are buried, literally. Brenda looked at the key. It was cold and heavy. Literally? She squeaked. Metaphorically, mostly. Chapter 36. The New Administration. Monday morning arrived with the subtlety of a freight train. The offices of Garrison PR, now a subsidiary of Wolfram Holdings, were in a state of absolute pandemonium. The news of the acquisition had broken over the weekend. Gerald had been escorted out of the building by security at 7 a.m., clutching his stapler and screaming about lawsuits until Mark, who had been assigned to personnel security, quietly growled at him. Brenda walked through the glass double doors at 9 a.m. sharp. She wasn't wearing her usual I hate my life cardigan. She was wearing a new tailored suit Declan had bought her, and around her neck hung the diamond steering wheel pendant. Behind her walked Declan. He was wearing a suit that cost more than the building, and his presence sucked the oxygen out of the room. He walked a half step behind her, a position of support, not dominance, which was terrifying in its own right. The office went silent. Good morning, Brenda announced, her voice ringing out across the bullpen. Jane, Brenda's assistant, stood up from her desk. She looked at Brenda. She looked at the billionaire werewolf standing behind Brenda like a bodyguard. She looked at the massive diamond on Brenda's neck. So, Jane deadpanned, I guess we aren't quitting? We are pivoting, Brenda corrected. Jane, you are now the vice president of operations. Your salary just tripled. Congratulations. Jane blinked. Okay, I accept. Who do I have to kill? Nobody, Brenda smiled. But we have some new interns. She gestured to the door. Walking in were Eve and Evelyn, the HR twins from the gala. They were wearing matching gray suits and holding clipboards. They marched into the office, their noses twitching as they sniffed the air conditioning. The air quality in here is substandard, Eve announced to the terrified room. It smells of stress and cheap toner, Evelyn agreed. We will need to install ionizers. Behind them walked Silas, the former second-in-command of the Southern Pack. He was shaved, wearing a suit that was straining at the seams, and looked ready to rip a photocopier in half. Silas is our new head of conflict resolution, Brenda introduced. If you have a complaint, take it to him. The office staff looked at Silas, who cracked his knuckles and smiled a smile that was all teeth. I look forward to resolving, Silas rumbled. Great, Brenda clapped her hands. Everyone, back to work. We have a lot to do. We need to spin a story about why a gas leak caused a loud roaring noise in the Blackwood Forest Saturday night. She walked toward her office, formerly Gerald's office. Declan followed her in and closed the blinds. That went well, Declan noted, leaning against the door. They are terrified. Fear is a great motivator, Brenda said, sitting in Gerald's expensive ergonomic chair. It felt right. But they'll learn to love us, especially when they see the new dental plan. Jane seems resilient, Declan observed. Jane is unshakable, Brenda said. I'm pretty sure she suspects you're a werewolf, but she doesn't care as long as the check's clear. Declan walked over to the desk. He placed his hands on the surface and leaned in, trapping her in the chair. And you, Madam CEO? He murmured, his voice dropping to that purr that melted her insides. Brenda looked up at him. She looked at the chaotic office outside her window where wolves and humans were beginning to coexist in a weird, terrified harmony. She looked at the man who had turned her life upside down over a parking spot. I have a werewolf boyfriend, a corner office, and a VP named Jane who scares me. I've never been happier. Good, Declan kissed her nose, because grandmother wants us to host New Year's Eve, and she wants you to plan the menu. Brenda's smile froze. She wants me to plan a menu for 300 wolves? Yes, Declan grinned. Good luck with the meat budget. Chapter 37. The Return to the Scene. 2 days after the Great Snowstorm and the subsequent corporate takeover of Garrison PR, the city of Manhattan finally dug itself out. The roads were salted, the subways were running, and life had returned to its chaotic, noisy normal. Brenda stood in the foyer of the penthouse, wrapped in a scarf that probably cost more than her rent. She was holding a set of keys. Not the keys to the Aston Martin, nor the keys to the Bentley that Declan had tried to gift her that morning. It has heated seats, Brenda. It is safer. She was holding the keys to her 2014 Honda Civic. We have to go get it, Brenda insisted, buttoning her coat. It's been sitting in the impound lot or the parking garage for 4 days. It's lonely. It probably thinks I've abandoned it for a younger, sexier model. Declan leaned against the doorframe, looking impossibly handsome in a casual navy sweater. He crossed his arms, his biceps straining the fabric. You have abandoned it for a younger, sexier model, he pointed out, smirking, and the car is a death trap. Mark inspected it. The brake pads are worn, the suspension is non-existent, and the passenger door only opens if you hit it with a specific amount of force. It's called character, Declan, argued Brenda. That car has seen me through 3 breakups, 2 job changes, and a cross-country road trip where the AC died in Nevada. We have a bond. I can't just leave it at the plaza. I can have it crushed into a cube, Declan suggested, helpfully. You can keep the cube as a paperweight. No cubes, Brenda grabbed her purse. We are going to the plaza. I need to drive it home. It's a matter of principle. I can't be the Luna of the pack and leave my litter behind. Declan sighed, a sound of long-suffering affection. He grabbed his coat. Fine, but I am following you in the Aston. If that tin can breaks down, I am not towing it. I am leaving it to the scavengers. Deal, Brenda grinned. Fluffy stays here. He judges my driving enough as it is. They took the elevator down to the garage. Mark was waiting by the Aston Martin, looking relieved to be doing something normal, like driving, rather than guarding a PR office from disgruntled former employees. The drive to the Platinum Plaza was smooth, the city washing by in a blur of gray slush and yellow taxis. Brenda felt a strange sense of nostalgia as they approached the shopping center. It had only been a few days, but it felt like a lifetime ago. The last time she was here, she was a stressed-out consultant worried about a watch. Now she was still stressed, but at least she had a wolf army and good dental insurance. They pulled into the underground garage. It was less chaotic than Christmas Eve, but still busy. Where is it? Brenda asked, scanning the rows of luxury cars. Where did the tow truck put it? I had them leave it, Declan said from the back seat. I told the tow operator to drop it exactly where they found it. I thought perhaps you would want to see it. There was a weird note in his voice, a mix of amusement and anticipation. You sentimental softy, Brenda cooed, reaching back to squeeze his hand. You wanted to preserve the memory of our meeting. Something like that, Declan murmured. Mark, level 3. The car descended into the bowels of the garage. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting long, dancing shadows on the concrete. The smell of exhaust and cold rubber filled the air, the scent of their beginning. Chapter 38, The Truth About the Spot. Level 3 was quiet. It was the VIP level, usually reserved for the high rollers and people who didn't mind paying $50 an hour for the privilege of not walking far. As the Aston Martin turned the corner toward the elevator bank, Brenda's heart did a little flutter. There it was, her gray Honda Civic. It was parked crookedly, sitting exactly where she had abandoned it to scream at Declan. It looked small and sad next to a gleaming Range Rover, like a stray dog at a pedigree show. But the spot was magnificent. It was wide, it was right next to the elevator lobby, it was the kind of parking spot you dream about, the kind of spot that people killed for, or, in her case, slapped a werewolf king for. Look at it, Brenda sighed as Mark brought the Aston to a halt. The spot, ground zero, the place where fate intervened. Declan opened his door and stepped out. He held a hand out for Brenda. She took it, stepping onto the concrete. She walked toward her car, feeling a swell of emotion. I was so angry that day, laughed Brenda, shaking her head. I thought you were just some arrogant rich guy stealing the only spot on the level. I mean, Look at it. It's prime real estate. Who wouldn't fight for this? She spun around, arms wide, gesturing to the empty space where Declan's Aston Martin had famously swerved in. It was destiny. If I hadn't been so stubborn, if I hadn't fought you for this spot, we never would have touched. The bond never would have snapped. We'd be strangers. She looked at Declan. He was standing by the trunk of her Honda, leaning against the concrete pillar. He wasn't looking at her with the usual, I adore you look. He was looking at her with a look that said, I am trying very hard not to laugh. What? Brenda asked, narrowing her eyes. Why are you making that face? Brenda, Declan said slowly, do you remember what you shouted at me? You said I violated the social contract of the parking garage? I did, and you did. You cut me off. And you said I was entitled, that I thought the rules didn't apply to me. Well, you are entitled, Brenda pointed out. You bought a PR firm to fire my boss. That's peak entitlement. True, Declan agreed. But regarding this spot, I think you should look closer. Look closer at what? It's a parking spot. White lines, concrete, close to the door. Declan reached out. He placed his hands on Brenda's shoulders and gently turned her around. He wasn't pointing at the spot itself. He was pointing at the metal sign bolted to the pillar right in front of the spot. On Christmas Eve, in her blind rage and panic, Brenda hadn't really looked at the sign. She had just seen empty asphalt. And since then, the garage had been covered in grime and shadows. But now, someone, probably Declan, had wiped the sign clean. It was bright red and white. Brenda squinted. Chapter 39. The Cart Return. The silence in the parking garage was heavier than the blizzard had been. Brenda stared at the sign. She blinked. She cleaned her glasses on her scarf and stared again. The sign did not say parking. It did not say reserved. It did not say VIP. In bold, uncompromising, reflective red letters, the sign read, No parking, cart return corral only. Violators will be towed. Brenda felt the blood drain from her face. She looked down at the white lines painted on the floor. Now that she wasn't seeing red with rage, she noticed they were different. They were yellow hash marks, the kind used to denote, don't park here. She looked at the metal railings on either side of the spot. They weren't protective barriers for a car. They were the narrow rails used to stack shopping carts. There was even a lonely, rusted shopping cart sitting forlornly in the back corner of the space, which she had conveniently ignored in her haste. It's, Brenda's voice came out as a squeak, it's a cart return? It is a cart return, Declan confirmed, his voice vibrating with suppressed laughter. Brenda started, her brain short-circuiting. I fought you for a cart return? You did, Declan confirmed. You were reversing into a designated area for metal baskets. You were about to park your car in a place that is structurally designed to scratch paint. And you? Brenda whipped around to face him. Her face was flaming red. You stole it. You pulled in. I pulled in to block you, Declan explained, his golden eyes dancing. I saw a woman blindly reversing toward a cart corral, likely obscured by the shadows. I swerved to stop you from destroying your rear bumper on those iron rails. I wasn't stealing the spot, Brenda. I was saving your taillights. Brenda's mouth fell open. The memories rushed back. I banged on his window. I screamed about entitlement. I slapped him. I slapped you, she whispered, horrified. I assaulted the Alpha King of the North because he stopped me from parking in a cart return. You called me your Royal Highness of douchebaggery, Declan reminded her helpfully. Oh my God, I'm the villain. I'm the Karen. I'm the parking lot Karen. I yelled at you for saving me. Why didn't you tell me? I tried, Declan laughed, stepping forward to pull her hands away from her face. I said, you are blocking traffic. I tried to explain, but you were vibrating. You were in a fugue state of rage. And then you hit me and the bond took over and, well, this sign ceased to matter. Brenda looked at the sign again. No parking. She looked at Declan. He wasn't angry. He wasn't smug. He looked like he had just won the lottery. I cannot believe this, Brenda groaned, leaning her forehead against his chest. My entire romantic origin story is based on a traffic violation. I am a terrible driver. Fluffy was right. I shouldn't be allowed behind a wheel. It is the best origin story, Declan said, wrapping his arms around her. It proves that you are fierce. You will fight for what you believe is yours, even if you are statistically and legally wrong. I was so confident, she muffled into his sweater. I used big words. You were magnificent, Declan kissed the top of her head, and technically you did get the spot. He gestured to her Honda, which was currently occupying the lane, blocking traffic exactly as it had on Christmas Eve. Brenda pulled back. She looked at him. She looked at the cart return. A bubble of laughter started in her chest. It rose up, unstoppable, until she was laughing so hard she had to hold on to the cart rail for support. I fought a werewolf for a cart return, she gasped, wiping tears from her eyes, and I won. You won everything, Declan agreed softly. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. Now, shall we have Mark drive the Honda home, or should I just buy the parking garage and turn this into a shrine? Don't you dare, Brenda warned, pointing a finger at him. If you buy this garage, I will tell the whole pack that you purr in your sleep. I do not purr, Declan denied instantly, though his ears turned pink. Get in the car, wolf boy, Brenda smiled, dangling her keys. I'll drive, but you have to navigate. Clearly, I can't read signs. The drive back to the penthouse was accomplished in Brenda's Honda Civic, with the sleek, $1 million Aston Martin following behind like a very expensive bodyguard. Brenda drove in silence, her hands gripping the steering wheel at 10 and 2, her mind replaying the cart return revelation on a loop. Every time she thought about it, the righteous indignation, the speech about social contracts, the slap, she wanted to open the door and roll out into traffic. When they finally pulled into the penthouse garage, Brenda didn't get out immediately. She turned off the engine and rested her forehead against the steering wheel. Declan tapped on the window. She unlocked the door and he opened it, leaning down to look at her. The fluorescent light of the garage reflected in his golden-flecked eyes. "Are you going to live in the car?" he asked gently. "I might," Brenda mumbled into the wheel. "It's safer here. I can't make any more catastrophic errors of judgment if I just stay in this bucket seat forever." "Brenda," Declan sighed, reaching in to unbuckle her seatbelt. "Come inside. It is cold, and Fluffy requires his evening tribute of salmon." He coaxed her out of the car. Instead of walking to the elevator, Brenda stopped in the middle of the concrete floor. She turned to him, clutching her coat tight. "I need you to say it," she said, her voice serious. Declan tilted his head, amused but sensing her distress. "Say what? That I love you? I tell you that every hour." "No," Brenda shook her head. "I need you to forgive me. I physically assaulted you. I verbally abused you. I called your grandmother a terrifying antique collector, which she is, but still. I caused a diplomatic incident with a rival pack because I can't read traffic signs." She took a deep breath. "I need absolution, Declan. I'm a crisis manager. I fix things, but I can't fix this unless the aggrieved party formally accepts the apology." Declan stopped smiling. He stepped closer, closing the distance between them until the toes of his boots touched hers. He reached out and cupped her face in his large, warm hands, forcing her to look up at him. His expression was solemn, almost ceremonial. The air around them thickened with the power of the pack bond. "Brenda," he said, his voice deep and resonating in the quiet garage, "you gave me the only thing I didn't know I needed. You gave me a challenge. You gave me laughter. You gave me a reason to be something other than a weapon." He stroked her cheek with his thumb. "You fought for a cart return because you have a fire in you that cannot be extinguished. That fire saved my territory. It saved my company. It woke up my heart." He leaned down, his forehead resting against hers. "There is nothing to forgive, but if you need to hear the words..." He kissed her, soft and lingering. "I absolve you," he whispered against her lips. "I absolve you of your traffic crimes. I absolve you of the slap. I absolve you of the insults. You are clear of all charges, my love." Brenda let out a breath she felt like she'd been holding since Christmas Eve. The weight on her chest dissolved. "Thank you," she whispered, "but I'm still never driving to that mall again." "Agreed," Declan smiled, pulling her toward the elevator. "Next time, we shop online." Epilogue 1. The Corporate Takeover. 1 month later. The offices of Wolfram and Garrison PR, formerly Garrison PR, were humming with activity. It wasn't the frantic, fear-sweat activity of the Gerald era. It was the efficient, slightly terrifying productivity of a wolf pack. Jane, now the VP of Operations, walked through the bullpen holding a tablet. She stopped at the desk of Keith, the former valet who had been hired as a junior associate. "Keith," Jane said sharply, "the press release for the midnight howling incident in Central Park. Did you blame it on the wind or an underground concert?" "Underground experimental jazz concert," Keith replied promptly. "It explains the dissonance and the screaming." "Good. Grandmother Kate liked the draft. Proceed." Jane moved on, passing the break room. Inside, Silas, former Southern Beta, now head of security, was having a heated debate with Eve and Evelyn, HR. "You cannot eat the clients," Eve was saying, pointing a manicured finger at Silas. "It is against the Employee Handbook, Section 4, Paragraph C." "He was rude," Silas grumbled, crossing his massive arms. "He insulted the Luna's font choice." "We just growl at rude clients, Silas. We do not bite. Biting creates paperwork. Brenda hates paperwork." In the corner office, the one with the view of the skyline and the newly installed espresso machine that cost more than a Honda Civic, Brenda sat behind her desk. She was typing furiously. On the desk sat a nameplate that read Brenda Wolfram, CEO and Luna. She wasn't technically a Wolfram by name yet, but the engraving guy was terrified of Declan and assumed it was safer to just add the name early. The door opened and Declan walked in. He wasn't wearing a suit today. He was wearing jeans and a black t-shirt, having just come from a site inspection, which Brenda suspected was just him running around the woods with Mark. "Lunch," he announced, placing a brown paper bag on her desk. "I'm busy," Brenda said, not looking up. "The mayor is asking questions about why our security team has yellow eyes. I'm trying to convince him it's a side effect of a new kale-heavy diet." "Eat," Declan ordered gently, spinning her chair around so she had to face him. He leaned against the edge of her desk, crossing his ankles. He looked happy. The lines of stress that had been etched around his eyes a month ago were gone. "How is the pack?" Brenda asked, opening the bag to find a gourmet sandwich, cooked meat, lots of veggies, and a cookie. "Obedient," Declan said. "They are terrified of you. Silas told the new recruits that if they are late, you will audit their taxes." "I will," Brenda confirmed, taking a bite of the cookie. "Fear keeps the deadlines met." Declan reached out and brushed a crumb from her lip. "My grandmother is coming for dinner tonight. She wants to discuss the wedding venue." "The wedding venue? Declan, we've been dating for a month. We haven't even gotten engaged yet." Declan just smiled. It was a slow, predatory, confident smile. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a ring box. "About that," he said. "I found a spot. A venue." "Oh no," Brenda narrowed her eyes. "Where?" "The roof of the parking garage," Declan grinned. "Level 4. It has a great view of the city and plenty of cart returns." Brenda stared at him. She tried to be annoyed. She tried to be the sensible crisis manager. But looking at him, her wolf, her partner, her disaster, she just couldn't do it. "You're lucky you're cute," she sighed. "Ask me properly." Epilogue 2. The Anniversary. 1 year later. The snow was falling again, coating the city in a familiar layer of white silence. It was Christmas Eve. The streets were jammed with traffic, shoppers were panicking, and the air smelled of roasted nuts and exhaust. But in the underground garage of the Platinum Plaza, Level 3 was suspiciously empty. In fact, the entire level had been cordoned off with velvet ropes. Security guards, who looked remarkably like wolves in suits, stood at the perimeter, turning away confused shoppers. In the center of the level, right next to the elevator, a long table had been set up. It was covered in a white tablecloth, set with crystal stemware, and illuminated by hundreds of candles placed on the concrete floor. And right next to the table, adorned with a giant red bow, was a brand new sign bolted to the pillar. "Reserved for the Luna," and her cart. Brenda sat at the table, wearing a red velvet dress that dragged slightly on the dirty concrete floor. She was holding a glass of champagne. Across from her, Declan cut into a steak. He was wearing a tuxedo that fit perfectly, free of shrimp cocktail stains. "This is ridiculous," Brenda said, gesturing to the empty, candlelit garage. You rented out the entire floor on Christmas Eve? Do you know how much revenue the plaza is losing? I own the plaza, Declan reminded her, pouring more champagne. I can lose revenue if I want to. You're a bad businessman, Brenda teased. I am a romantic husband, he corrected. He looked at her. A year ago, he had been a lonely king, prowling the city for a distraction. Now he was whole. He had a pack that was thriving, a business that was booming, and a wife who terrified his enemies with spreadsheets. And, sitting on a velvet cushion on the third chair at the table, was Fluffy. The cat was wearing a diamond-studded collar and eating fresh sashimi out of a crystal bowl. Meow, Fluffy declared, licking his chops. He says the service is excellent, Brenda translated. Happy anniversary, Brenda. Declan reached across the table to take her hand. His skin was warm, his grip steady. The bond between them hummed, a song of deep, unshakable peace. Happy anniversary, Declan, Brenda smiled, squeezing his hand back. She looked over his shoulder at the spot where they had met. The cart return was still there, right behind the new sign. You know, Brenda mused, I still think I could have made that parking angle. Declan laughed, the sound echoing off the concrete walls, chasing away the shadows. I know you do, little wolf, he said, lifting his glass. I know you do. They clinked glasses. Outside, the snow continued to fall, but inside the garage, everything was exactly where it was supposed to be. The end. Thank you for listening to this story by Lena Romantasy Collection. I hope Brenda and Declan brought a smile to your face. If you enjoyed the story, please like, share, and subscribe for more. I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below with a timestamp of your favorite scene, or tell me who stole the show. Was it the Alpha, the Luna, or Fluffy the Traitor Cat? Finally, if you'd like to support the channel directly, please consider giving a super thanks. Your support means the world and helps us bring more stories to life. See you in the next one.